Chapter 12:11. Wawa. Seeing that Dean did not respond, the origami called out again with a hint of affection. Dean was startled and carefully examined it. He suddenly found that its ferocious face was not very ugly, but more and more pleasing to the eye. He seemed to be able to read its thoughts and emotions from its expression. At this moment, the emotions it was conveying were excitement, attachment, and a bit of flattery. Wawa. The origami called out again. It stretched out its bright red tongue and licked Dean's arm. Dean did not feel any malice, so he did not dodge. He pondered for a while and suddenly thought of a way. He shrank some of the sharp blades on the outside of his body and extended a soft, pale yellow tentacle from the inside. It contained Crimson Moon's Dream Breeder ability, and it was slightly modified to be able to read the memory of other creatures and communicate with them telepathically. The tentacles slowly extended to the origami's forehead. The latter did not dodge, as if it was not worried that Dean would hurt it. It just squinted its eyes and called out a few times with a smile on its face. The next moment, a sharp mouth appeared in front of Dean's tentacle and pierced into the origami's forehead like a poisonous snake. The origami was in pain and shook its head slightly, but it did not move away. However, its eyes became a bit watery, as if it was about to cry. Dean felt like he was in a whole new world through the tentacle. A large number of emotions came to his face. The main emotions were grievance, reluctance, dependence, and a strong sense of closeness. At this moment, he felt that his blood seemed to be connected with this monster. There was an inexplicable feeling that he could not explain. It was like a blood connection. It was like this monster was his closest family. When he felt the grievance and sadness, he had a feeling of love and wanted to take good care of it. He felt that his feelings were a bit absurd, but the feeling that was transmitted to his bones was so clear. It was like the feelings he had for his father, mother, and sister. It was even 10 times stronger than that. He did not dare to be surrounded by such feelings. He quickly controlled his emotions and cut off the communication with it. He directly went into the core of its brain and explored its memory. Soon, Dean saw a large number of memories flashing in his sight. He saw his body spontaneously combusting, saw his body being swallowed and chewed up, saw Crimson Moon being killed, saw the Demon King escaping. I was eaten by it, although he had guessed it before, but seeing this scene, Dean still felt unbelievable. He was shocked by what happened next. Crimson Moon had actually been instantly killed and swallowed. A dignified demon emperor actually fled without a fight. The scheming Lin Changsheng was like a stray dog, battered and exhausted. This monster was hatched from his heart. From the moment it hatched to the moment it defeated the 3 omnipotent powerhouses, it took less than 20 minutes. This is a true god. Dean retracted his tentacles and looked at the origami that was crying in front of him. He subconsciously raised his hand and touched its head. When he reacted, he found that his hand was already stroking its head. Meanwhile, after the origami was caressed by Joshua, the tears in its eyes quickly stopped. Its expression became joyful as it grinned, revealing its sharp teeth that could bite through steel plates. Dean saw its sharp teeth, but he did not feel that it was ugly and ferocious. Instead, he found it pleasing to the eye. He did not know if it was because of the long period of killing that distorted his sense of beauty, or because he had been dealing with monsters for so long that he was already used to it, numb to it, or some other reason. He retracted his gaze from its sharp teeth and said thoughtfully, "It hatched from my heart. My heart was used by Crimson Moon, and the heart that was formed was composed of origami genes. Logically speaking, it should be an origami, but an origami should not be this strong. The body that Lin Changsheng controlled was also an origami, and the Demon King was also an origami, but they were defeated by it when it was just born. Perhaps the heart not only contains origami genes, but also the essence of the icy demon bug and the flaming demon bug. The path to godhood that Burrow researched is a combination of the icy demon bug, the flaming demon bug, the origami, and a human with a special body structure. Many different types of energy are perfectly balanced in the body of this special human. The ice will freeze, the flame will burn, and the origami will self-destruct. Although they are all incomparably powerful creatures, they are all too extreme. Only by achieving a balance, an alternating cycle, can they become immortal. Crimson Moon's experiment was not perfectly implemented in my body, but the heart that was formed naturally formed the most perfect balance. Therefore, what was bred from it was not an origami, but a real god, an immortal creature with a terrifying speed of evolution. It was able to evolve quickly from birth, adapt to various environments, and absorb all external materials to transform into the energy that it needs. Dean's body was shocked when he thought of this. There was an inexplicable feeling that was both awe and excitement, and also a strong expectation. Judging from the current situation, this god that was bred from the heart was very fond of him, and it was very close to him. Could this make it a powerful help for him? The more he thought about it, the more excited he became. He suppressed his emotions and tried to slowly extend his tentacles to the forehead of the origami. This time, it seemed to be more nervous and not as casual as before. When the origami saw the tentacles, it instinctively raised its head. It seemed to know that it would be painful, and it was a little scared. Dean was amused when he saw the appearance of the origami. He thought of the large amount of grievances that he had felt before, and his heart was inexplicably in pain. With the body of the origami, not to mention the little bit of pain just now, even if its body was cut into tens of thousands of pieces, it might not let out a scream. Perhaps it was afraid because it cared, or was it because of emotional pain? The most hurtful thing in the world was not a knife, but words that were like knives. Although it was afraid, the origami did not dodge. Instead, it was like a wronged child, and crystal-clear tears appeared in its red eyes. Dean wanted to softly comfort it, but he thought that it could not understand his words. So he slowly penetrated the origami's forehead with the tentacles. It was like a leech sucking blood silently, without the slightest pain. Then he felt the emotions of fear and grievances surging. He tried to communicate and comfort it. It seemed that the tears in the eyes of the origami had quickly dried up, as if it could feel the gentle, comforting thoughts of the origami. At the same time, a lot of information was transmitted to the origami, like countless words. Mother, do you want to eat? Chapter 12:12. Could it be that it was born from his heart and absorbed his genes, which was why it thought so? Dean thought of some beasts and monsters. Most of them did not rely on visual judgment, but smell or sound to identify their children. Perhaps this origami was the same. However, he did not expect that such a terrifying creature was not a cold-blooded creature. Most monsters had the habit of eating their children. Some would even eat the monsters that they mated with. With the power of this origami, it did not need the care of its mother. It could even eat him as food. However, it did not. Instead, it relied on him. Judging from the way it played with Lin Changsheng, this thing is smart and cunning. It could eat me and become the most powerful existence in this world. Dean looked at the grinning origami and his eyes flickered, but it allowed me to get close to it. It didn't even resist when I stung it. If I did out of malice and had the strength to do so, I could have killed it. It should know this, but it still treated me like this. Is it because it does not believe that I will harm it? A monster is actually tied down by human emotions and put itself in danger. Wow. The origami tilted its head and let out a cry. A few tentacles that looked like blood vessels split out from its neck and gently touched Dean's arm. The tentacles were soft and full of attachment. Dean sobered up from his thoughts as he saw the origami's action. There was a trace of complex emotions in his mind, but he quickly restrained them. In any case, the situation of the origami was a good thing for him. If he could make good use of the origami's help, then it would be easy for him to trample over the Empire and rule the Federation. He quickly had an idea in his mind. He used telepathy to send a few words of comfort to the origami. Then he tried to communicate with it and let it land on the ground. The origami was very obedient and immediately landed on the ground. Dean tried to let the origami split the giant ball in front of him. The origami didn't say anything as it turned into a giant blade and cut the giant ball vertically. and it sent a message to Dean as if it was seeking praise. At the same time, it told Dean that it was hungry. The ferocious expression of the origami became pitiful in Dean's eyes. "It's really obedient," Dean thought in his heart, and then let it absorb the matter on the ground to fill its hunger. Origami felt wronged and indignant, but it still obediently penetrated its arms into the ground. Soon the elevation of the surrounding ground was reduced. Dean could clearly feel that his blood was boiling and his energy was exuberant. It was as if a hungry person had eaten a lot of food. He had strength that he couldn't use anymore. His whole body felt comfortable. "The energy it absorbs will also be transmitted into my body?" Dean was surprised, but on the surface he was very calm. His eyes flashed quickly. Right at this moment, a premonition of danger descended. Dean could not help but raise his head and look in the direction of the cold feeling. His pupils suddenly shrank. At the same time, the origami that was happily absorbing the substance of the earth raised its head and looked at the same time. Its mouth that was wide open suddenly closed, and its expression changed drastically. It was incomparably ferocious, and its crimson eyes were filled with rage. Nuclear bomb. Dean saw a dozen very shallow black spots whistling in the sky, and he immediately recognized that they were nuclear missiles. He reacted and quickly sent a message to the origami, telling it to dodge. The origami shook its head stubbornly and told Dean that it wanted to completely destroy these things. Dean was a little anxious, and he quickly sent a message to the origami about the destructive power of these weapons. Because of the telepathic communication, the speed was extremely fast, and it could directly transmit the horrifying picture of the nuclear explosion in his mind to the origami. The origami still stubbornly shook its head, indicating that it could handle it. Dean could not help but be stunned, and only reacted after a moment. With the intelligence and cunning of the origami, it would not be careless for no reason. In that case, he did not know enough about its power. He just wanted to let it deal with it, and also to see how strong it was. Suddenly, he thought that the appearance of these nuclear weapons was a little strange. Shouldn't these things be sealed by Scarlet Moon and Candle Dragon? How could they appear here? Could it be that the Demon Emperor took out these nuclear weapons after escaping? If that was the case, when the nuclear weapons exploded, the Demon Emperor who escaped would most likely come back to check. Thinking of this, Dean's eyes narrowed. Seeing that the missiles had flown to the edge of the desolate host city, he once again sent a message to the origami, telling it all his thoughts. If these thoughts were communicated in words, it might take 7 or 8 sentences to finish, but the telepathic communication was just a matter of a moment. The origami who was about to make a move was slightly stunned, and quickly sent a message of agreement. It seemed that this matter was very interesting, and it grinned at Dean, revealing a mouth full of white teeth. Then, with a swoosh, its body shrank into the soil. At the same time, a magic armor appeared around its shoulder, protecting Dean inside, not letting him be rubbed by the sand. Dean felt a little touched by its thoughtful behavior, and he looked at it. Sensing Dean's gaze, the origami grinned and accelerated its diving speed. In the blink of an eye, it had shrunk to thousands of meters underground. The next moment, a loud rumbling sound came from the surface, and a terrifying force also came through the soil layer, as if a giant mountain was smashing down. The whole earth trembled, and the soil was pressed tightly, and the terrifying, squeezing force crushed countless grains of sand. Dean found that he could feel the changes in the surrounding soil through the body of the origami, but he didn't feel much pain. When the huge force came down, the origami's body instantly turned into a hard diamond, and the surrounding soil didn't shake even a little bit. In addition, it also constructed several layers of shell, and the shell was covered with small holes, and the black mucus was spat out like a spider web, and the surrounding soil was sticky like its own limbs, so it could be controlled. Boom, boom, boom. Continuous vibration came, as if a giant was holding a mountain, and kept hitting the ground above its head. Soon, a high temperature was transmitted through the soil above. Precise strike? It seems that the Federation has an antenna that can monitor this place. Dean's eyes flashed as he passed the message to the origami. The origami slightly grinned, indicating that there was no need to worry, and at the same time, it told Dean about its idea. Dean couldn't help but be surprised as he sensed the plan passed by the origami. This insidious idea, how come it was the same as his? After more than a dozen consecutive bombardments, a large amount of heat poured down from the top of their heads, and the temperature kept rising. More than a dozen nuclear bombs detonated in the same area, and the nuclear fusion reaction caused by the superposition was like a landslide and a tsunami. The Earth was peeled off layer by layer, revealing the dark soil underneath. The soil burned by the high temperature of the nuclear bombs turned crimson, revealing the flesh and blood of the Earth. The molten lava splashed like blood. Chapter 12:13. Such a violent explosion. The host city should have been completely destroyed. Dean felt the violent vibration coming from the top of his head, but he didn't feel nervous. Instead, he felt an incomparably solid sense of security. This feeling came from the enchanted shield that was given to him by the origami. The shield surrounded his body and didn't suffer the slightest damage. He just felt a little stuffy. At this time, the origami stopped diving. A large number of soft tentacles split from its body and plunged into the hot rock layer above his head. Dean was puzzled. He reacted when he felt a burst of energy in his body. Was this guy absorbing the power of a nuclear bomb? Is the nuclear bomb ineffective against it? Dean was shocked. The adaptability of the origami was too fierce. Could it be that only the high temperature of hundreds of millions of degrees could kill it? After a moment, the vibration of the nuclear bomb gradually stopped. The ground was plowed hundreds of meters deep. The rock stratum that was thousands of meters above sea level was boiling hot. However, Dean and origami, who were in the crevice of the rock stratum, didn't feel much. In fact, they felt a little comfortable. It seems to have stopped. Dean was relieved as he listened to the movement above. Fortunately, there isn't a nuclear bomb like the Soviet Union's Big Ivan. Otherwise, the adaptability of this guy may not be able to resist it. I don't know if Lin Changsheng didn't create such a nuclear weapon or if the Demon Emperor didn't launch it. He was worried that most of the Federation would be destroyed. The nuclear weapon of the Big Ivan level was enough to destroy half of a country. It could even move the territory of a continent. It was a giant among nuclear bombs and the main killer that caused the cataclysm. In any case, Dean felt that he couldn't continue to sit still and wait for the nuclear bomb. He immediately urged the origami. Wow! The origami responded cheerfully. Suddenly, a lump of flesh split out from its body and turned into its own appearance. However, its body was tattered and scorched black. The origami pushed the separated flesh to the surface of the ground where the explosion happened. Then, it brought Dean to thousands of meters away. Even if the signal of the Federation is good, it shouldn't be able to monitor the situation here. We will be in the Federation when the dust dissipates and we see the corpses. Let's find Lin Changxing first. Dean's eyes lit up. It didn't matter if it was the Demon Emperor or not. Lin Changsheng was a bigger threat to him, and he would get more benefits after killing him. The Demon Emperor hid in the dark, and it was very difficult to find him. However, Lin Changsheng was different. The Federation was his base, and he couldn't be too far away. Whoosh! The origami brought him underground at extreme speed. It had demonized into a pangolin-like monster. Its entire body was covered with scales. It moved through the mud like a fish in the water without any hindrance. They came to the nearest city after a few minutes. There were a lot of refugees in the city. Dean saw several underground shelters through his X-ray vision. They were overcrowded. There were some people hiding under their beds and tables like shivering mice. Dean sent a message to origami. They passed through the mud and metal walls and quietly appeared in a shelter. Dean deliberately asked origami to change her appearance into a human before entering the shelter. Origami was very obedient. She transformed into a petite girl who was about 1.4 meters tall. Her hair was black and soft. She had bright eyes and white teeth. She had a face that was almost perfect in human aesthetics. At the same time, Dean reminded her to use flesh and blood magic to create an elegant long skirt. If someone touched the skirt, they would find that it had a flesh-like texture. Dean, who was on her shoulder, moved to the edge of her neck. He shrunk to the size of a thumb and was covered by her long hair. During this process, Dean knew that their relationship was like a symbiotic life. If necessary, he could even completely shrink his body into hers. "Dad, I want Dad." The sound of a child crying echoed. Dean looked over and saw an officer dressed as a guard stride over. "Don't make a sound, or I'll throw you out." The child's mother was like an enraged lion cub. She held the child in one hand and roared at the officer. "Why are you so fierce? Why are you throwing us out? We bought tickets to come in. I've spent so much money. Did the child's crying annoy you?" The officer's expression was gloomy as he said, "The situation outside is very complicated right now, and there are many more people who want to come in than you can imagine. If you don't want to stay, then I'll send you out right now. If you want to continue staying, then be quiet. If you attract those damnable devils, then you won't be able to survive even if you have 9 lives." The woman's arrogance weakened as she heard these words. The people around her looked at her with reproach. Feeling the gazes from the surroundings, the woman felt as if her pride had been pricked. Indignantly, she said in a low voice, "Isn't it all because you soldiers have nothing to do? What's the point of using the taxpayers' money to feed a bunch of good-for-nothings?" The officer's face turned cold. He wanted to attack, but he held back. Dean saw the officer's expression. It seemed that they didn't know the specific situation outside. He retracted his eyes and sent a message to Aragami. The Aragami understood what he meant. She cleared her throat and smiled at a nervous young man beside her. "Little brother, what's the situation out there?" Her voice was sweet, like the sound of nature. The young man, who had a nervous expression on his face, was obviously stunned for a moment. He turned around and looked at the Aragami. His pupils were obviously dilated for a moment, as if he was stunned by the Aragami's appearance. He was stunned for a moment before he finally reacted. His face blushed as his body involuntarily sat up straight. He then revealed an expression that he thought was friendly as he said, "I don't know either. I heard that the President of the Confederation had sent people to seize the nuclear weapons. The explosion that we heard just now should be the sound of the missile's explosion. It was very close to us. The signal should be out in the entire city right now." There was a trace of worry on his face as he spoke. Dean was surprised. The Federation had sent people to snatch the nuclear weapons? Could it be that it was Lin Changsheng who fired the nuclear weapons? If that was the case, then there was too much information contained within. Lin Changsheng really hid it well. If it wasn't for Aragami, then Crimson Moon and the Demon Emperor would have been annihilated. Dean exclaimed in his heart as he understood Lin Changsheng's plan. He whispered in Aragami's ear, "If it was Lin Changsheng who fired the missile, then I think I know where he is now. Let's go and find him." Aragami, who had turned into a human, had learned the human language. She didn't need to use telepathy to communicate. "Yes." Aragami nodded. "Ah." The young man looked at the Aragami doubtfully. Then he saw the beautiful girl suddenly shrink her body and burrow into the ground, disappearing without a trace. The shelter under her feet was made of metal plates, and it was still in perfect condition. Everything seemed like an illusion. Love phone reading address. Chapter 12:14. Snow Mountain City. It was located on the western edge of the Federation. The Federation had more than a dozen such remote and inconspicuous cities. Their economy was generally backward, and their buildings were low. They were ranked at the bottom of the Federation. The local citizens born in these cities were also nicknamed Wastelanders by the people in the other first-tier cities. Snow Mountain City was famous for its snowy mountain scenery. Every summer, it would attract a large number of tourists to visit the snowy mountain that never melted all year round, bringing in an objective amount of income for Snow Mountain City. It was currently summer, but the snowy mountain was desolate and uninhabited. The invasion of the demon race had led to the collapse of the Federation government, and the internal strife in the army had affected the hearts of every Federation citizen. Other than a small number of people hiding in the shelters, The rest of the people were obediently hiding in their homes, shivering in fear. They were constantly paying attention to the Federation government's announcement, hoping to see some good news. Whoosh! A nearly transparent figure whizzed over from the horizon, stirring up a weak wind current. He landed on a great snow mountain like a snowflake, as light as a feather. The blurry light and shadow around his body gradually faded away, revealing Lin Chongsheng's face. He glanced around and suddenly saw a few youths sneaking around the cable car. After a closer look, he realized that they were actually preparing to pry open the cable car and steal it to sell. It was just a false alarm. He let out a sigh of relief and waved his hand. The snow on the ground rolled up and turned into several steel needles that shot out, instantly piercing through the excited and busy youths. They didn't even have time to scream before their bodies trembled and stiffened on the ground. Lin Chongsheng didn't even bother to look at them. After getting rid of a few eyesores in passing, he shook his body and transformed into a four-limbed, snow-white little critter. He dived into the snow and climbed quickly. Very soon, he dived into the bottom of the snowy mountain. The snowy mountain stretched for 300 miles, and the highest peak was around 3,000 meters. At this moment, Lin Chongsheng had dived all the way from the top of the main peak to the bottom, and he continued to climb for around 500 meters before stopping. At this time, a metal wall appeared in front of him, blocking his way. Its structure was the same as the underground base of the host city, made from the materials of the demonic insect spaceship. His figure gradually turned incorporeal and melded into the metal. After passing through the orange-yellow world, he arrived at the interior of the metal wall. This was a huge warehouse, and a large number of missiles and mechanical warriors were displayed. Every mechanical warrior was made from the most advanced technology of the Federation, and they could instantly kill the Abyss and rival the kings. Unfortunately, although the destructive power of these mechanical warriors was terrifying, the energy they required was even more terrifying. Although Lin Chongsheng had pushed for the development of energy technology, and the energy source had already been upgraded many times, it was still unable to meet the needs of these mechanical warriors. They could only be activated for a short period of time, and could not fight for a long time like the kings. Therefore, they were sealed here, and only the huge energy source in this base could allow them to fight and squander freely. Lin Chongsheng quickly walked to a huge instrument that looked like a giant tree and asked, "How's the situation? Did you kill it?" A hologram of Lin Chongsheng was projected on the huge instrument. His expression was cold and rigid as he said, "The situation in the explosion area is still being scanned. The signal interference is too severe. It will take another 1 minute and 32 seconds for the result to come out." Lin Chongsheng frowned slightly, but he also knew that it was useless to be anxious. He muttered to himself, "The explosion should be able to attract the attention of Phineas. If that guy goes back to check, don't let him get away with it. No, I have to prepare a second wave of missiles." The hologram said expressionlessly, "What about the machinery hive mind? Was it damaged?" Lin Chongsheng shook his head. "It's in my body, so I won't take it out for the time being. If Phineas appears, I'll need to borrow the power of the machinery hive mind to get rid of him and eliminate any future troubles. Now that the blood moon is approaching, I have to settle everything before the blood moon arrives. Otherwise, I might not be able to hide this time." According to the analysis, the probability of Phineas turning back to check is 17.5%. The probability of him following you from afar is 31.9%. And the probability of him leaving directly is 56%. The hologram said indifferently, "Following me?" Lin Chongsheng was stunned. His heart suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. He felt a chill on his back. He did not think of this. He immediately released his senses and spread it out of the base, extending it to the snowy mountains outside. When he did not see any suspicious traces, he let out a sigh of relief. It was only a 1 in 3 possibility. It seemed that Phineas did not choose to follow him. Or perhaps after seeing the strength he displayed, he knew that it would be difficult to defeat him even if he caught up to him. So he directly left. It seems that he is still not as brave as his father. Unlike his father, who went to the deep sea of the Pacific Ocean alone to kill that white abyss amidst hundreds of millions of sea beasts in order to become a god. Lin Changsheng shook his head. He felt pity for Phineas. This might be his last chance. Once he killed this origami and obtained its genes, he would become the strongest life in this world, the one and only god. By then, even if the blood moon came, what was there to be afraid of? The situation has been scanned. I'll send it to you on the screen. The hologram suddenly said. Lin Changxing nodded. A scene of smoke and dust covering the sky appeared on the big screen. From the gradually dissipating dust, he could see that the ground was scorched black like the magma of an erupting volcano. There was a huge ravine that divided the land. There were occasional snowflakes on screen. The image that was analyzed was not very clear. Soon, Lin Changxing saw the scene at the core of the explosion. That is, suddenly, Lin Changxing noticed an extremely inconspicuous black dot. When he looked closely, he realized that it was a burnt corpse. A corpse? A thought appeared in Lin Changxing's mind. However, he quickly felt that something was wrong. After thinking for a while, he could not help but laugh coldly. This beast still wanted to play tricks on him. It was too stupid to use the same trick twice. However, he had already confirmed in his heart that this origami was not dead. Instead, it was hiding in the dark, preparing to give him a fatal blow. Unfortunately, he did not plan to fight this monster at the scene. If he could solve the problem with a nuclear bomb, why would he do it himself? Tell the others to prepare for the second bombing. This time, use the mountain splitter. Keep bombing until the place is completely blasted. Lin Changxing ordered. The hologram said coldly, according to the analysis just now, if this origami is not dead, there is a 93% chance that it had hidden underground before the bombing. If the bombing continues, it will notice that I have seen through its intentions and leave. Then, we will not be able to find it anymore. Lin Changsheng said coldly, I know. The bombing is just to tell it that my attention is there. If it leaves, the first place it will go is the nearby city. Now, activate the surveillance network immediately. Check every suspicious existence. Once the target is locked, prepare to activate the 100 million-ton myth. It doesn't matter even if it is completely wiped out. From the corpse of the bait, we can obtain its genes. Through the surveillance network set up by the Confederation, as long as the origami sneaked in, he was confident that he could definitely find out its disguise. Although this origami was cunning, his computer had never made a mistake. As long as the target was locked on, it would be 100% real. Activating the surveillance network requires the insertion of the mechanical heart. The hologram said. Chapter 12:15. I'll give it to you. Lin Changsheng reached into his chest, and a moment later, he took out a magical metal that looked like a Rubik's Cube. The color of the metal was silver, but was also slightly transparent. It also seemed to have a fluorescent blue color, and it seemed to be constantly changing colors. This fist-sized thing was the core engine of the Federation mainframe, which could drive the Federation mainframe to perform billions of calculations per second. Prepare to insert. The shadow's eyes flashed as it said indifferently. Two metal coils extended out from the enormous tree-like machine at the back, sucking up the mechanical heart and sending it into a groove in the center of the machine to load it. A moment later, the Phantom seemed to have received a message from the mainframe and said to Lin Changsheng, the entire network surveillance has been activated, currently searching for suspicious, unfamiliar faces. Results will be available in 48 seconds. Lin Changxing nodded. If this monster appeared in the Federation, it would either appear in the form of a monster or demonize into a human. If it was a human, he could look for unregistered residents on the household register and choose from them. If the monster ate someone and transformed into that person, then the second step would be to look for abnormalities in their behavior. With the computing power of the mainframe, it would not take long for the results to come out. A moment later, the shadow said, no suspicion on unregistered residents and no suspicion on unfamiliar faces. The probability of this monster sneaking into the Federation has been reduced to less than 40%. Analyzing the behavior of the population and searching for suspicious targets. Lin Chongqing asked, "How long will it take?" "About 5 minutes, the shadow said. Lin Chongqing heaved a sigh of relief. 5 minutes was still manageable. After all, this step required too much data. Being able to complete it in a short 5 minutes was already an incredible feat. While waiting, Lin Chongqing thought of the burnt corpse that was still at the site of the nuclear explosion and ordered, "Send a team of mechanical warriors to bring the corpse to the 4th Research Institute immediately." "Already sent," the shadow said. Lin Chongqing nodded slightly. The shadow was also him. With the mainframe's help, he thought more comprehensively than he did. Beep beep. Suddenly, the base lit up with a red light, and an alarm sounded. Lin Chongqing and the shadow were shocked at the same time. Lin Chongqing quickly said, "What triggered the alarm?" "Something touched the defense circle and is quickly coming here." The face of the virtual shadow changed. It was no longer expressionless and indifferent. He quickly moved the surveillance footage to the big screen, replacing the image of the place where the nuclear bomb exploded. On the screen, an elongated shadow was swimming quickly in the soil of the snowy mountain, like a shark in the ocean, murderous and extremely fast. "It's a monster? Impossible. Where's the ability test?" Lin Chongqing shouted anxiously. Soon, an energy value fluctuation appeared on the side of the screen. At this moment, the energy value was blood red, which meant that the energy value had exceeded the upper limit of the detector. "It's him. It's that monster." Lin Chongqing found it hard to believe. His expression was incomparably ugly. "How did it find out about this place? It's impossible that I didn't lose it. If it knew where I was, it should have chased after me a long time ago. Why did it only come now? It wants to catch us all in one fell swoop." The phantom's expression was incomparably gloomy, and it quickly said, withdrawing from the mechanical heart, "Hide inside your body immediately. Without the mechanical heart, you can't fight against it." Lin Chongqing sobered up and quickly rushed towards a tree-like machine. At this moment, the base fiercely shook. The next moment, a terrifying aura spread out from Lin Chongqing's back and filled the entire base. This aura was full of strange evil, ferocious, and ruthless. It seemed as if the entire base was covered in blood. "You really are here." A familiar voice came from behind. Lin Chongqing suddenly froze. He turned around and saw a petite girl standing in the distance. She was less than 5 meters tall, and she was looking at him with a sweet smile. However, there was a touch of chilling evil in her beautiful eyes. On her shoulder, there was a fist-sized figure. "You didn't die." Lin Chongqing was shocked, but then he woke up. "So this thing is you. I was wondering how it could be so cunning. It turns out that you are hiding in the dark. You can actually control this monster. Doesn't it have self-awareness?" Dudian knew that Lin Chongqing had misunderstood, but he was too lazy to explain. He noticed Lin Chongqing's posture. When they came in, Lin Chongqing had already noticed them, but he didn't escape. Instead, he rushed towards a tree-like machine. His behavior was suspicious. Thinking of the mechanical heart and the Federation's host hidden in the base, Dudian suddenly understood. He sneered and said, "Death is imminent, and you still think of treasures. You're a bit greedy. I didn't expect that after living for more than 200 years, you can't escape the greed of human nature. In the end, you are still immortal." Lin Chongqing came to his senses after hearing his words, but he did not dare to rush toward the machine. Glancing around, he saw that the groove of the host had been opened, and the mechanical heart was suspended inside. There seemed to be a special force field that made it float in the air. His throat rolled. This was the only capital he had against Dean, but he knew that with Dean's intelligence and cunning, as long as he moved, he would immediately see through his intentions. Moreover, from Dudian's words, he found that Dudian still didn't know the use of the mechanical heart. His heart was somewhat relieved. People die for wealth, and birds die for food. Aren't you greedy? Lin Chongqing followed Dudian's words and retorted sarcastically. At the same time, His body naturally pulled a few steps away from Dudian and moved closer to the giant tree. Dudian smiled and said, "No matter what, we can be considered acquaintances. How do you want to die?" Lin Chongsheng laughed. "Die? Do you think you can kill me? More than 200 years ago, when I was nothing, I survived from the hands of the demonic insect sage. Now I'm only one step away from becoming a god. No one can stop me. Whether I can kill you or not, we will know in a while. For the sake of your brain, I will leave your corpse intact." Dudian smiled. Lin Chongsheng's smile suddenly disappeared. He sneered and said, "Don't you know that villains always die because they talk too much? If you had made a move at the beginning, there would have been a little chance, but now..." At this moment, his position was slowly approaching the giant tree. With his full burst of speed, it would only take a moment for him to catch the mechanical heart from this distance. Indeed, they die because they talk too much. Dudian shook his head and smiled. Lin Chongsheng was too lazy to be long-winded with Dudian. The purpose of delaying had been achieved. His body instantly burst out and rushed towards the giant tree-shaped host. Bang! The host suddenly exploded. A blood-colored tentacle stretched out from the ground. At the moment of the explosion, it rolled up the fluorescent mechanical heart and shrank. Chapter 12:16. What? Lin Chongsheng's pupil shrank, and his heart turned cold. In the next moment, he roared and pounced forward, but he only saw a huge hole at the bottom of the metal plate. At the same time, the ground behind him suddenly cracked open, and 7 or 8 blood-red tentacles rose from inside, waving in the air like poisonous vines. This is the mechanical heart. Dean's upper body extended out from the shoulder of the origami girl, like the genie in Aladdin's magic lamp. The lower part of his waist was elongated, and he held a sparkling and translucent Rubik's Cube in his hand. This was the thing that the Demon Emperor and Crimson Moon had been searching for. He knew that this was the crystallization of the demonic worm's wisdom, and it contained extremely high-end demonic worm technology. The entire Federation's network system was driven by this small piece of mechanical heart. If this thing was embedded in a spaceship, it could allow the spaceship to travel between the stars and jump through space. On the planet where the demonic worm resided, there were very few such top-notch technological products. And this piece was one of the most outstanding pieces because this was the mechanical heart that was configured on the exclusive spaceship of the demonic worm. "Give it back to me." Although he knew that such words were meaningless, Lin Chongsheng could not help but roar in desperation. Dean ignored him and turned over the mechanical heart in his hand, gently twisting one of the surfaces, only to hear a clicking sound. "Is this the restart?" "You!" Lin Chongsheng was so angry that his body trembled, and he clenched his fists so tightly that his nails dug deep into his flesh. Dean looked at the shadow of Lin Chongsheng and saw that the shadow disappeared with a clicking sound. He knew that the part of Lin Chongsheng's memory that he had plundered did not deceive him. The restart of the mechanical heart required the restoration of 108 disordered star maps. His method seemed simple, but in fact he had combined part of Lin Chongsheng's memory and found a shortcut to quickly restart the mechanical heart. When the mechanical heart was rebooted, all the Federation systems would also restart, just like restoring the factory settings, and the virus Lin Chongsheng inside would naturally be completely erased. What was alive now was Lin Chongsheng's memories that had been injected into the origami's body. To be precise, Lin Chongsheng was already dead, and this origami was only living in Lin Chongsheng's way. "You really shouldn't talk so much in the face of death." Dean shook his head and smiled. "If you had gone to get this thing and used the mechanical warriors to stop us, then you could have bought some time. Unfortunately, you wanted to play tricks with me. You gave me time to decompose the metal structure of the base and assimilate it. How could you be so stupid? You..." Lin Chongsheng's eyes were blood-red, and his body was trembling with anger. Although Dean's words were extremely sarcastic, but he knew that what Dean said was true. If he had rushed over right from the start, he might have had a chance to obtain the machinery heart. If he had the computing assistance of the Cortex Prime, he could think of thousands of possibilities in an instant and choose the best method through probability. However, without the aid of the mainframe's calculations, his own thinking became incredibly slow. He could only rely on his own intuition to come up with the best solution, and not the best solution in the end. Is there anything else you want to say? Forget it. I'll see it myself. Dean sent a telepathic message to the origami girl. The latter understood and grinned. She raised her hand, and a large number of tentacles shot out from the ground towards Lin Changsheng. The tentacles filled the entire base and shot towards Lin Changsheng. I'm not willing. I'm not willing. Lin Changsheng let out an angry roar. His hair flew in the air, growing several meters long and shooting out like countless steel needles. He pushed his hands forward, and his fingers turned into earthen yellow flying snakes that twisted and bit at the incoming blood-colored tentacles. The origami girl looked at him with a smile. She didn't see how she moved, but the tentacles that were fighting with the flying snakes shot out silver threads and black mist. They surrounded Lin Changsheng and shrouded him in darkness. If there is hell, I'll wait for you in hell. Lin Changsheng's furious roars came from within the black fog. He was like a trapped beast that was screaming at the top of its lungs. Dean faintly smiled. With your wisdom, you shouldn't believe in heaven and hell. Break for me. In the black fog, Lin Changsheng's entire body was entangled by the silver threads. The black gas that permeated the silver threads gradually nibbled away at the cells in his body, trying to invade his body and plunder it. He gathered all the strength in his body and pushed, but he found that the silver threads expanded as he pushed, but they were still stuck to his body. Despair, grief, regret, and ferociousness. Lin Changsheng's heart was already in despair. His outstanding wisdom and rationality had made him proud, but at this moment he sadly discovered that he could only be one step ahead of ordinary people. He was more clear and rational about his current situation, so he was in despair earlier and gave up struggling. Without the power of the mechanical heart, the power of his own demonized body was completely incomparable to Dean. Until now, he still thought that the origami monster was Dean's body. He felt the fear of cannibalism from the silver threads. It seemed that the origami monster was the natural enemy of his body. He suddenly thought about why the Demon King would run away. It should be because the origami monster was a purebred origami. How did you know that I would be here? Did you take away the part of my memory? Impossible. There is no such thing in my memory. I built this new base. Lin Changsheng didn't resist the erosion of his body. He shouted towards the outside of the black mist. He knew that he was going to die. He smiled. Blame yourself for being too careless. I wouldn't have been able to find you if you had gone to the other bases in my memory. But I guess you wouldn't have chosen to go to those bases. You would have built a new base. I know the location of the other bases, although I can temporarily hide, but if I can't find you then, I will go to those places to search. So it is necessary to build a new base. Where is the most suitable place to build a new base? You have to think about it carefully. Since you're forced to build a new base, it means that the situation is the worst. So the location of a new base is not suitable to be built in the main city where the 4 major families are located. It is also not suitable to be built in bustling places. The Federation must have fallen into the hands of others. It is easy to be exposed in bustling places. Therefore, you can only choose a deserted place. Unfortunately, you have built too many bases. In that memory, you have considered many cities. Only this snowy mountain city and 7 other remote cities were not considered. Therefore, according to that memory, you can choose one of the 8 cities as your new base, avoiding the cities that you have considered in that memory. Snow Mountain City is remote, and the snowy mountain is suitable for storing nuclear weapons. The reason why I found this city was mainly because of the invasion of the demons. Among the 8 cities, only this city didn't send mechanical soldiers to participate in the war. They didn't directly surrender either. Instead, they relied on some weak city defense forces and a group of hot-blooded mecha operators to fight. You're trying to avoid arousing suspicion, so there are no mechanical soldiers stationed in this city. Lin Changsheng's face turned ugly, but there are no mechanical soldiers stationed in other cities. Why did you think of this city? Of course it is the terrain. Dudian smiled. Snow Mountain City is the furthest from the host city on the map. Lin Chongqing's heart ached. He understood how big his mistake was. Although Dudian's words sounded simple, but the combination of the 2 points was enough to arouse suspicion. You have ignored the place, but your enemy will firmly remember it for you. Now you shouldn't be able to spontaneously combust. Dudian looked at Lin Chongqing's body, which was penetrated by the black gas. The silver threads were like needles that pierced into his body. As long as he gave the order, the origami girl would swallow him. Ha ha, Lin Chongqing smiled. He wanted to say something, but Dean didn't give him the chance. Dean sent a message to the origami girl. Lin Chongqing only had enough time to let out a muffled groan as his body was quickly surrounded by darkness. The darkness seemed to come out from his body and shrouded him as it gradually shrunk. It's not that the villain dies because of talking too much. It's the dead that are called villains. The survivor is the protagonist. Dudian muttered to himself as he looked at Lin Chongqing, who was completely engulfed by the darkness. He slightly shook his head and looked at the origami girl. Did you keep his memory? I kept it, the origami girl replied. Dudian nodded and glanced at the ruins of the base. Let's go out. The origami girl immediately took his body out of the underground base. They stood at the top of the snowy mountain. The cold wind was biting cold, and the sky was white. No matter how outstanding he was when he was alive, he died like a dog. Maybe the future generations will beautify this story and tell how tragic and brave he was. Dudian couldn't help but sigh as he killed a sly fox who had lived for more than 200 years. But I'm here, so he can only be a clown in the history of the Federation. The history of the Federation should be changed. Chapter 12:17. Northern Federation, Barbarian Land. A crimson forest stretched for hundreds of miles. The trees in the forest were fiery red, as if they were burning. The monsters that lived in the forest had blood-red fur and scales, and the venom in their fangs contained fire poison. This crimson forest was famous in the Federation. It was regarded as one of the many forbidden areas. The monsters in the forest were generally around rank 7. It was said that in the center of the forest, there was a top rank 11 monster, comparable to the king of humans. At this moment, on a giant tree in the center of the forest, the heart of the tree was hollowed out. There was a tree hole inside. In the tree hole, there were wooden beds, mirrors, bedding, and other items. In addition to these daily necessities, there were also some strange metal machines. In front of one of the instruments that looked like a telescope, a tall, fair-skinned young man was sitting there, adjusting the instrument in his hand and unscrewing one of the nuts. Suddenly, he paused and looked out of the window of the tree hole as if he had sensed something. Outside was the shadow of a fiery red forest, extending into the distance. And at the end of the distance was where the Federation was. Did something happen? The young man frowned. His eyes were a bit dignified. He immediately stopped adjusting the instrument in his hand and turned to the bottom of the bed to find a metal box. It looked like a pencil box, but its hardness was higher than diamond. He authenticated the fingerprint to unlock the box. The box opened. Inside was a strip of metal. In the middle of the strip was a miniaturized screen with a red asterisk pattern. His pupils shrank. Although he had a feeling in his heart, it was still hard to believe when it really happened. He took out the metal strip and inserted it into a machine next to him. Soon, a lot of data appeared. He entered a code, and the chaotic data quickly combined into several video screens and a lot of information. He slowly browsed. For a long time, after reading all the information, he slowly closed his eyes. Finally, he knew what kind of shocking change had happened in the distant Federation. God is actually born. He closed his eyes and muttered to himself. After a moment, he slowly opened his eyes. Since God is born, it proves that the research of the great sage demonic insect is correct. As long as I follow this direction, I will eventually become a god. No matter what, as long as I live, there will always be a chance. Dean, I remember you. I don't know what the battle between the two gods will be like in the future. Ha! His eyes looked in the direction of the Federation. His cold eyes showed a bit of expectation. After killing Lin Changsheng and rebooting the Federation's mainframe, Dean held the mechanical heart in his hand. He felt that the entire Federation had fallen into his hands, and this made him very excited. With the Federation as his supply station and the origami girl fighting for him, it was only a matter of time before he could seize control of the Empire. He would be able to order everyone to look for Aisha in the Empire after he took over the Empire. Soon, I'll see you soon. Dean's mind appeared Lisa's face. Her sweet smile and indifferent expression after turning into the undead were so moving. Dean looked at the origami girl. Give me his memories. Yes, Mom. The girl nodded obediently and raised her white and slender palm. Her palm suddenly split open like a petal, revealing a lump of bloody flesh. This bloody scene was in sharp contrast with her pure and beautiful face. Dean was already used to it. He had sensed the name of the origami girl from their spiritual communication, so he didn't care too much about it. According to human aesthetics, even if he gave birth to her, he should be the father. However, in her worldview, gender had no meaning. If she wanted to give birth to a child, she could reproduce monogamously or change her gender at will. God was omnipotent, and that naturally included sex change. Looking at the lump of Lin Changsheng's brain, Dean used Crimson Moon's Dream Breeder ability to read its memories. Through the previous communication, Dean already knew what happened after his spontaneous combustion. He also knew why he was in a symbiotic relationship with the origami girl. When the girl was born, she swallowed his body. Her purpose wasn't to eat him, but to decompose his body into countless cells. Then she would use the special structure of the girl's body to store the cells separately to prevent his genes from spontaneous combustion. As for the countless memories of Crimson Moon and BOLO, they came from the information left by the origami girl after she swallowed Crimson Moon. Unlike his situation, Crimson Moon was completely swallowed and digested by her, and all the broken memories were the signs of being swallowed. While reading these memories, he also learned all of Crimson Moon's abilities. In addition to her Dream Breeder ability and Bolo's Dark Realm ability, he also learned the abilities of many other legendary monsters. In the imperial capital of the Empire, there were not only 8 legendary monsters as recorded in the Sylvia Giant Wall Monster Atlas, but there were 1,362 legendary monsters. This number included all the legendary monsters that were active in the Giant Wall area. Many of them were already extinct, suspected to have died or evolved into other monsters. These were called ancient monsters. The number of legendary monsters that were found by adventurers in the wilderness was less than half of the number recorded in the Atlas. Even so, there were still 500 or 600 of them. Each legendary monster's growth potential was at least at the Dominator level, and a little below the middle could evolve to the Abyss level. As for the best among them, it wasn't rare for them to evolve to the King level. There were even some monsters that had evolved beyond the level of legendary monsters and were classified as supreme monsters by the Empire. Each of these supreme monsters had the power to shake the Giant Wall. During the establishment of the Empire, there were many monsters that destroyed the Giant Wall. Every monster that could destroy the Giant Wall was classified as a forbidden level supreme monster. However, the supreme magical beasts were not the most terrifying monsters on the Empire's exploration list. Among the many legendary demonic beasts, Crimson Moon had used her special privileges to study the abilities of over 100 legendary demonic beasts after pledging allegiance to the Demon Emperor. However, it wasn't always better to have more abilities. After all, in a real battle, the decisive blow was usually the fatal blow. However, the abilities of these legendary monsters had their own strengths. They could be combined to create more advanced abilities. This was the purpose of Crimson Moon's painstaking study. At this moment, the abilities of these legendary monsters were all in Dean's mind. He used Crimson Moon's specialty, Dream Breeder, to delve into Lin Changsheng's memories. This memory was the Demon Emperor and Crimson Moon's main goal this time. With Lin Changsheng's erudition and understanding of science, he could completely help Dean conceive more and more powerful abilities. The strength of God mainly depended on the strength of his ability. Therefore, God needed to be omniscient. Although Lin Changsheng had the wisdom close to God, his body couldn't keep up with the profound abilities. Although he knew how to construct them, he couldn't do as he wished. It was like a person who hadn't practiced the splits before. The origami girl's body was extremely flexible. She could complete any difficult movements. As long as the posture was taught to her, she could immediately learn it. The Demon Emperor in Crimson Moon's body structure was very close to the origami girl's body. Like Dean's original physical fitness, they were at the demigod level. If they added Lin Changsheng's knowledge, they could barely display the combat power close to God's level. It was enough to kill all the kings. As for the true God, in the eyes of the demon insect, Lin Changsheng, and the Demon Emperor, it was just an existence that they pursued and yearned for. It was an ultimate form of life that could be achieved in theory. Even if the scientific theory of human could cross the solar system, explore the universe, and colonize various planets, it would take many years for humans to reach the moon. As for the colonization of the solar system, it was even more unattainable. It would take countless years. Chapter 12:18. Dean sorted out Lin Changsheng's memories. There was a huge amount of information inside. It was 1,000 times more than the memories of ordinary people. Even Crimson Moon's memories from the origami girl was far less than 1% of Lin Changsheng's memories. Crimson Moon's memories had a lot of useless hypnotic memories woven by BOLO. Even so, it paled in comparison to Lin Changsheng's memories. Although Lin Changsheng had lived for more than 200 years, his memory capacity was only twice that of an ordinary person's. However, Lin Changsheng's days in the virtual world were too colorful. Through the virtual world, he could read anything that was happening in the Federation. All the major news, the private affairs of certain influential figures, or the dirty dealings of the underworld were all seen by him. For ordinary people, most of the days of life were monotonous and repetitive. They would wake up, eat, finish day after day's work, and rest. They would be like a clockwork robot. It was extremely boring. But for Lin Changsheng, every day was different. He could see interesting things at every moment. When he encountered a problem, he could think of thousands of ideas in a second with the help of the AI. Although he had discarded the useless ideas, Dean dug out all of them when he read his memories. They were scattered and needed to be sorted out slowly. 5 days passed in the blink of an eye. Dean finally accepted all of Lin Changsheng's memories. He knew what kind of person Lin Changsheng was from an all-around perspective. There was even a moment when he thought of himself as Lin Changsheng. However, in order to prevent Lin Changsheng from using Bo Luo's technique, he had made preparations in advance. He quickly came to his senses and felt that everything that Lin Changsheng had experienced was like a passing cloud. His feelings were no longer as deep. The blood moon is coming. The demonic insects will reappear. Dean squinted his eyes and looked up at the sky. It was noon. Heavy snow was falling from the sky. The snowflakes were sticky with nuclear dust. Although the host city was far away from here, the impact of a nuclear explosion had affected more than half of the Federation's environment. Several days of heavy snow had shrouded the Federation. The nuclear radiation in the snowflakes had a great impact on newborns and pregnant women. This year, the Federation had given birth to millions of children, and most of them were deformed. Although it was broad daylight, Dean's supervision could see a silver moon looming in the sky. Who would have thought that the moon that had illuminated the earth for countless years was the source of their nightmares? Lin Changsheng had been preparing for the descent of the blood moon for more than a decade. This was the calamity that Lin Changsheng was most afraid of. Every time the moon turned crimson, the murderers that had nearly wiped out humanity, the demonic insects, would once again descend upon Earth, and the place they would descend upon would be the Federation. If Lin Changsheng was the demonic insect's experimental subject, then the entire Federation was the demonic insect's incubator. The billions of citizens of the Federation were not Lin Changsheng's private property, but the demonic insect's private property. The demonic insects were the true rulers of the Federation. As for Lin Changsheng, he was just a substitute that the demonic insects had snuck out of Earth to take over. If the demonic insects knew that he was still alive, they would definitely reactivate the machinery hive mind and kill him. The one that replaced the demonic insects to manage the Federation was actually the AI. However, Lin Changsheng had already invaded and destroyed the intelligence system constructed by the demonic insects, and the current intelligence system was a complete replica created by Lin Changsheng. It was worth mentioning that the replica intelligence system had managed to deceive the demonic insect sage who had come to examine it during the 2 previous blood moons and demonic insects' descent. Now was the 3rd time that the blood moon descended. Lin Changsheng felt that it would be more difficult for him to deceive it this time. Therefore, he had been preparing for more than a decade to seize the bodies of the demon emperor or the 2 dragon lords of the fire dragon country to become a god. In this way, even if the demonic insect led an army to descend, it would be difficult to cause any harm to him. Instead, it would become his prisoner. The demon emperor and candle dragon lord's attack on the Federation was actually secretly facilitated by him. Dean only knew about this after reading Lin Changsheng's memory. He couldn't help but be aghast. If it wasn't for him and Crimson Moon's existence, the demon emperor and candle dragon lord would have all been buried here. Unfortunately, when Lin Changsheng's plan was about to be completed, he discovered Dean, who had sneaked into the Federation. Therefore, Lin Changsheng slowed down his plan and prepared to become a god through Dean's body. If he could borrow Dean's body to become a god, then when the demon emperor and candle dragon lord arrived, he would have absolute confidence in hunting them down. Unfortunately, Dean's body was incomplete. In the later battle, the origami girl, a true god, was born, which caused all of Lin Changsheng's plans to fall short. No matter how much I calculate, I can't calculate every unknown change in this world. Dean thought. Now that Lin Changsheng was dead, the person that the demonic insects had to deal with when they descended was him. He couldn't recreate the AI like Lin Changsheng to deceive the demonic insects. He could only fight, but he wasn't worried. From Lin Changsheng's memory, although the demonic insect was strong, it wasn't a match for a god. This was the ultimate life that the demonic insects and the origami pursued. In other words, even for the demonic insects and the origami, this was the ideal state that they pursued, but they were far from reaching it. Therefore, the origami girl that was born in his heart was undoubtedly the most powerful existence in this world, the most terrifying life. Moreover, this life was under his command, which meant that he held the most powerful power in this world. After reading Lin Changsheng's memories, the mysterious veil of this world had been completely lifted in front of him. In the past, when he was just an ordinary person or a hunter, he had always felt that this world was unfathomable and that he could not see the source behind it. But now he knew everything. The demonic insects are divided into 2 races, the ice demon insects and the flame demon insects. The ice demon insects control the Federation and study the mysteries of becoming a god. The flame demon insects rule the fire dragon country and also study the mysteries of becoming a god. The origami occupy the central region and also want to solve the mysteries of becoming a god. They desire immortality and coexist with the universe. The war in the old era was too tragic. The 7 continents were torn apart by the bombardment of nuclear bombs. Humans started the doomsday plan and were ready to perish together with the invading demonic insects. Unfortunately, they failed to do so. They only made the surface environment worse. The small fragments of the islands have sunk under the claws of the sea monsters. The large continents are also gradually shrinking. The former big continents have shrunk to less than the territory of a big country. The human countries, the Federation, the Empire, and the Fire Dragon country are divided into 3 parts. The north is the corpse country ruled by the mutated corpse king. It's a forbidden zone for living people. Chapter 1219. In the doomsday plan of the old era, humans didn't kill the demonic insects. They didn't perish together with the demonic insects. Humans were lucky enough to survive. They tried their best to reproduce, but in the end, they became the test subjects of the demonic insects and the origami. If the leaders and scientists who made this plan knew about this result, I wonder what kind of lament they would make. However, the nuclear explosion had caused great damage to the demonic insects and the origami. Although they weren't completely destroyed, they were greatly weakened. The main forces had evacuated from the Earth, and only the base was left to continue the experiments. The world that Dean saw from Lin Chongqing's memory was completely different from the world that he saw in Sylvia. In Sylvia, people believed in the origami. There were countless bards who sang praises for the origami. They sang about its virtues in their own stories and legends. The giant wall was engraved with the statue of the goddess of Sylvia to protect people from the invasion of the demonic insects. All of these made people firmly believe that the origami used to fight against the demonic insects for mankind. They were the protectors of mankind. Even the history of the giant wall was recorded as such. But in fact, the origami did fight against the demonic insects. They fought fiercely, but it wasn't for mankind. It was for the delicious cake that was the Earth. At the beginning of the war, the demonic insects invaded from outer space. However, the invasion of the origami was silent. They infiltrated into the human society in the form of parasites. Even the people who participated in the Doomsday Plan were guided by the origami. In Dean's impression, the origami were gluttonous, ferocious creatures that devoured everything. But in fact, the origami race did have the ability to absorb most of the materials and convert them into their own life functions. But they weren't stupid. On the contrary, they had an extremely high IQ. If the IQ was measured in the human way, then the origami's intelligence was generally higher than that of humans. However, their planet was too barren. They needed too many materials for their own activities. That was why they had to plunder other planets. It was like if one day the population of the Earth expanded and the food produced wasn't enough for humans to eat and drink. There would be famine and a large number of people would starve to death. But before such a situation occurred, countries would develop family planning policies in advance to prevent such a tragic thing. However, the origami were different from the humans. They would suffer from famine as well, but they would not starve to death so easily. Every origami could absorb anything and everything around them. They would eat trees, water, and soil. They would eat everything on the planet, just like a swarm of locusts. Moreover, the lifespan of origami was extremely long. If they did not encounter any natural disasters, they could live for thousands of years, or even tens of thousands of years. That was why the origami had no choice but to kill each other. However, the origami were not fools. Once they had killed each other to a certain number, they would turn their attention to the vast universe. In order to survive, the origami had no choice but to plunder nonstop in order to survive. Meanwhile, the planet where the demonic insects were located was the first planet that the origami had ever explored. However, the demonic bugs were not to be underestimated. The ice demonic bug and the flame demonic bug occupied the two sides of the planet. They had been fighting each other since they were born, and the long struggle had prompted them to continuously evolve, learn, and become stronger and stronger. Therefore, even though the origami were terrifying, they would still be at a great disadvantage if they were to cross planets to fight on the planet of the demonic insects. Furthermore, the demonic insects had a very strong reproductive ability. They were even faster than the rabbits on Earth. However, the difference between the demonic insects and the rabbits was that the reproduction of the demonic insects depended on their own will. When they did not want to reproduce, they would not reproduce at all. Just like that, the war between the origami and the demonic insects lasted for a long time, until the origami obtained a conjecture from the demonic insects. This conjecture made the origami race completely excited. It was as if a new world had been opened for them, a new path of survival. That conjecture was to become a god. According to the definition of the demonic insects, gods were immortal, It had the ability to absorb all kinds of energy or substances and convert them into their own life force. They could survive in any harsh environment. Theoretically, even a black hole that could devour light could not destroy them. Gods were omnipotent. They did not have the concept of life because they were eternal. This conjecture had inspired the Aragami's hope of survival. They no longer needed to spend a lot of resources to travel back and forth between the demonic insects and their own planet to transport food back and forth. They could evolve themselves. Even if they could not become an unrealistic god, they could evolve themselves to be more adaptable to the environment and the universe. They could even survive in space and on planets without life. So the Aragami race began their journey of evolution. After a long time, they finally evolved to the point where they barely solved the problem of survival. However, at that time, the Aragami began to yearn for the eternity that the demonic insects were pursuing. So they frequently attacked the demonic insects planet. The demonic insects planet was already at its limit after years of war. Seeing that it was about to collapse, the great sages of the demonic insects and demonic insects had to work together to discuss countermeasures and find a way out. So they migrated their spaceships and wandered in space, preparing to migrate to a new planet that was suitable for living. When they were migrating, they did not notice that the Aragami were secretly following them. When it came to exploring the stars, the Aragami were more advanced and professional than the demonic insects. After all, in order to survive, they had been searching for a new planet that was suitable for living even before the demonic insects stepped out of the ancestral planet. During their long wandering, the demonic insects found the visitor signal that the humans had sent to the outer solar system. Through the feedback of the signal, they locked onto the position of the solar system and found Earth. Countless human scientists explored the stars. They felt that humans were too lonely in the vast universe, so they wanted to find aliens. However, on that day, the demonic insects arrived in a majestic and gloomy spaceship. The entire Earth fell into an unprecedented panic. When the demonic bugs were invading Earth, the Aragami that were tailing behind them had quietly descended upon Earth. With their parasitic characteristics, they had blended into the human population and quickly figured out the human society and civilization. It was just like the first time they invaded the demonic bug planet. The information was found by Lin Changsheng from the demonic insect spaceship and the Aragami spaceship. There were some incomplete spaceships of the Aragami and the demonic insect spaceships all over the Earth. Dean still remembered the scene of the demonic insect's arrival. From the TV, he saw a huge spaceship emerging from the clouds and descending over the city like a mountain. The entire city fell into panic. No one knew that it was the doomsday of mankind. The enemies that mankind faced were not only the demonic insects, but also the terrifying Aragami that had infiltrated the human society. In front of these two races that could cross the stars, mankind was like a child. They could not withstand a single blow. Even the most powerful nuclear weapons couldn't change the outcome. The Earth still fell into the hands of the Aragami and the demonic insects. After the catastrophe, the Aragami and the demonic insects reached a balance. They found that the Earth was not only suitable for living, but the humans on the Earth were thermostatic creatures. According to the experiments of the demonic insects, the only feasible way to become a god was to combine the extreme powers of the ice and the flame insects. Then they would achieve a certain balance. Then they would be able to live forever. Thermostatic creatures like humans were an opportunity for the demonic insects. They tried to borrow the human body to find the balance between ice and fire. However, ice and fire were two extremes. The ordinary human body couldn't withstand it. So they tried to change the physique of humans. So they built a base on the Earth. That was the Federation, the Fire Dragon country. On the other side, the Aragami were aware of the intention of the demonic insects and built an imperial base. All three parties were doing their best to develop and research. They knew that if one of them was the first to create a god, then the other two parties were bound to be struck by lightning. They would either be destroyed or reduced to food. The law of the jungle was the only unchanging law of the universe. It wasn't only the humans who were experiencing the doomsday. The origami and the demonic insects were also suffering. Countless other animals on the earth were also in this doomsday. Where was the true face of the virus? Who would be able to stay out of trouble? It was estimated that the King of Darkness would end at the end of the month. Well, it might end on the 4th or 5th of the next month. It depended on the degree of diligence. Chapter 1220. The so-called divine fetus is suitable for balancing the body of the ice and fire monster. It is also the purpose of the monster and the origami. That's why there's a monster research institute in the giant wall. On the surface, it seems that they're studying the effect of the monster and magic marks on the hunters. But in fact, they're studying human beings. More than 200 years ago, Lin Changsheng was the only one who succeeded in the sage ice demonic insects experiment. However, he was lucky enough to deceive the sage ice demonic insect and hid his consciousness in the virtual world, while his body was taken away from Earth by the sage ice demonic insect. My body is also a divine fetus, but when I was born, the monster hadn't come to the Earth yet. Dean recalled the memory of his birth. There was some pain in his heart. Although he didn't want to remember and believe it, the scenes told him that he was created and not conceived by the mother. His birth came from the pursuit of longevity of life. He was a human's experiment, but he met the needs of the ice and fire monster and became a divine fetus. His creator, his father, froze him for personal reasons when the human race was about to be destroyed. He hoped that he could be the last spark of the human race and pass on the civilization. But in the world 300 years after his awakening, human beings still existed. They were spread all over the earth. It was not like what his father had imagined. Even without him, the inheritor, they were still living a good life. They were singing and dancing in the giant wall. On the contrary, he was struggling to survive in the human world after the catastrophe. So he woke up. The world didn't need him. It could still run. He wasn't the savior of the world. No one would care about such an inconspicuous person like him becoming the savior of the world. And he himself had long extinguished the idea of being a hero to save the world. The many experiences brought by the trajectory of life promoted the growth of people. From a naive and rebellious teenager to a sophisticated and docile middle-aged man. It was a kind of sadness, but no one could change it. It was like the law of the earth around the sun. It was irreversible. And he enjoyed it. Now that Lin Changsheng is dead, the Federation is a group of dragons without a leader. Let's recover the Federation first, and then chase after the Demon Emperor. Let him prepare and catch him in one fell swoop. Dean thought of the current situation. The world that used to be hazy was now completely clear in his eyes. The three major forces divided the world into three parts. The monsters and the corpse kingdom were nothing to worry about. It was clear how to deal with and consider. This was because he was standing at a high position and could see far, but it also made him lose interest. Some things were painful to see too clearly. Before we reclaim the Federation, I'll separate my body first. Dean glanced at the origami girl. Through telepathy, he knew that they were in the same community, but it was not a pure symbiotic relationship. No one could leave the other. One had to know that when this desolate god girl was born, she came out from his body. Even without him, the desolate god girl could still live. However, he who had spontaneously combusted was definitely going to die. In order to preserve his life, the desolate god girl used her own body to nourish him. Because he did not have a heart, once he left the desolate god girl, he would quickly die. There were only two ways to break away from such a community relationship. The first way was to become a god. In this way, all the problems would be easily solved. But after reading Lin Changsheng's memory, Dean found that it was almost impossible for him to become a god. It was even more difficult than solving the problem of the walking corpse virus, because he did not have a heart. His body was incomplete and not qualified as a god's fetus. So the power of the ice fire bug and the power of the desolate god could never reach a balance in his body. Even if he used the demonized organization to construct a heart, it would be meaningless. And his original heart had long been cut into pieces by Crimson Moon and thrown into experiments. Those experiments were abandoned in the giant wall of Sylvia, and some were in other giant walls. They had long rotted and turned into maggot feces. However, even if he couldn't find the original heart, there was another way, and that was to find a replacement heart. However, the replacement heart could not make him a god, but it could let him leave the desolate god girl and live alone. The stronger the replacement heart, the stronger the power he could use. And right now, there was an excellent replacement heart, and that was the mechanical heart. From Lin Chongqing's memory, Dean knew the use of the mechanical heart. It was not only used on machines like the mainframe, but it could also be embedded in the body to replace the heart. However, to be able to use the mechanical heart, one must have a king-level body like him. If it was an ordinary person or even a powerhouse from the abyss, they would not be able to connect to the energy port of the mechanical heart, let alone withstand the terrifying energy of the mechanical heart. Previously, Lin Chongqing was able to use the body of the desolate god to fight with the desolate god girl, and it was also because of the energy of the mechanical heart. Before he was ready to embed the mechanical heart, Dean used telepathy to ask the desolate god girl if he left her body, would she still treat him like this? But the answer he got was yes. This time, Dean was relieved. From the fact that the latter broke out of the heart and took the initiative to protect him, it could be seen that it was not because of the community that made her so obedient. He first extracted his body from the body of the desolate god girl, and in the process, the latter also took the initiative to help him separate out the cells that belonged to him. It fell to the side of the snow like a lump of soft meat, and then the inside of the soft meat constructed a skeleton, internal organs, and other things. Slowly, it stood up and turned into a slender young man, which was Dean's original appearance. At this time, he had completely separated himself from the body of the origami girl. He instantly felt an unprecedented emptiness in his heart. It was even more desolate than this snowy world. He could not wait to stuff something into his heart to fill up this indescribably uncomfortable feeling. So he quickly grabbed the mechanical heart beside him, melted his palm, wrapped it around his hand, and pulled it into his chest where his heart was located. Then he used his flesh and blood magic to create an interface and connected it to the mechanical heart. Instantly, two thumping sounds could be heard, causing his entire consciousness to buzz. The next moment, the strong beating became more and more clear, and the abnormal, uncomfortable feeling in his heart also disappeared, replaced by a vigorous energy that filled his whole body, as if the blood in his body was roaring, full of power. Is this the energy of the mechanical heart? No wonder it can drive the spaceship to jump between the stars. It's enough to let me squander my body at will. Unlike before, when I used too much force and my heart couldn't bear it. Dean felt the vigorous power in his body and tried to use his fingers to quickly transform into different tissues, such as cutting blades, magic claws, shields, and so on. Hundreds of kinds of abilities flashed at his fingertips, and the speed of the demonization was extremely fast, even faster than the previous full speed. Please remember the original domain name of this book. Mobile version website. Chapter 12:21. With the help of the mechanical heart, Dean felt that he could defeat the demon emperor by himself, even without the help of the origami girl. After all, even if his body was incomplete, it was still a divine fetus. It was far stronger than the previous origami that Lin Chongqing controlled. Now that he had regained his freedom and extraordinary power, Dean didn't delay any longer. He immediately set off. The first step was to eat the Federation. The Federation was still in panic, except for the first batch of refugees who hid in the underground shelters. The rest of the people were hiding in their homes or running to the temporary safe houses built by the military to seek shelter. The Federation had never suffered such a disaster before. The shelters that were prepared in the past couldn't accommodate the residents of the cities. The corpses of the soldiers of the Empire could be seen everywhere on the streets. When Lin Changsheng gave the order to activate the nuclear bombs, the army of the Federation that had been obedient rebelled. Several military giants took the lead to resist and beat back the troops of the Imperium that were keeping an eye on them. They seized control of a few cities and then contacted the generals in other cities, preparing for a counterattack. There was no lack of wise people in the Empire's army. They quickly found out about the secret contact of the Federation military. A bloody battle of resistance and conquest began. In addition to fighting against the soldiers of the Empire, the Federation military also had to fight against some military leaders who had betrayed the Federation. These military leaders had the military secrets of the Federation. They would be promoted if they surrendered to the Empire. They cooperated with the soldiers of the Empire and exposed many of the strategic arrangements of the Federation military. This made the counterattack particularly difficult. Fortunately, the terrorist consortium actively cooperated with the military. They invested a lot of mechanical armors and forcefully reversed the situation. The other three consortia didn't make much movement. They seemed to be waiting for something. Clearly, they were waiting for the outcome of the battle between the Demon Emperor and Lin Changsheng. This would affect their choices. After all, they weren't like Jasaloti, who was a loyal dog raised by Lin Changsheng. They didn't have a deep understanding of Lin Changsheng, so they couldn't place their entire financial group's fate on his trust. Killing, chaos, blood, and wailing. The entire Federation was in deep water. The destruction brought by the war was devastating. All the beautiful things were torn apart. Only the bloody fruits were left in the hands of the victors. Don't cry. Mom is here. Haiyang, I'll be waiting for you at home. Be careful on your way here. The streets outside are full of demons. Don't let them see you. You bunch of beasts. You even dare to kill the elderly. And Almighty God, please protect us. In every corner of the Federation, the sounds of gunshots covered up the cries of children in the ruins. The rain of bullets pierced through the blue sky. Fighter jets roared and circled above the city. Smoke filled the air. Buildings were bombed, collapsed, or burned. Demons and troops could be seen everywhere on the streets, and there were even old scavengers curled up and shivering beside them. Dean flew out of Snow Mountain City. The railway connecting the cities had long been closed. Some of the air tracks were destroyed by bombs. He could only rely on himself to fly to the Federation capital. He wanted to use the equipment there to put an end to the war. Along the way, the scenes of disaster fell into his eyes. Even though he had experienced Sylvia's coup d'etat and the subsequent series of vicious actions, he still felt a little sad when he saw this miserable world that was like purgatory on Earth. Man fears suffering, but man often creates suffering for each other. On the battlefield, everyone was innocent, but no one was worthy of sympathy because everyone was pitiful. Only the mastermind behind the scenes of the war, watching coldly from the sidelines, was the most cruel. Dean didn't expect that the Demon Emperor didn't order the withdrawal of the soldiers. Once he left, the remaining forces wouldn't be able to compete with Lin Changsheng. They would be sacrificed in vain, unless the Demon Emperor thought that Lin Changsheng would be killed. He doesn't know of my existence, so he thinks that after killing Lin Changsheng, he will destroy everything. But he won't rule the Federation like a human. Dudian looked at the girl who was flying next to him. He was able to survive this time. Moreover, he had extraordinary strength because of her help. He was inferior to Lin Changsheng in terms of strategy and strategy. Dudian was defeated by Lin Changsheng. Unfortunately, man proposes, God disposes. This time, luck was on his side. What should I call you in the future? Dean asked her. The origami girl looked at him in puzzlement. What should I call you? Dean suddenly understood that although she had learned the human language, she still didn't understand the rules of the human world. He thought for a moment and said, You are not a human, so you don't need to have a human surname. After you were born, the first sound of your word was a, so use it as your surname. You don't have a gender, but since you have become a female, then use the one next to the female character. You're the first god in the world, and maybe the only one. God is your name. I will call you off from now on. How about it? The origami girl didn't understand Dean's question. She clapped her hands. Okay, Dean was relieved to see that she did not reject the name. In fact, he named her with a purpose of testing her. Now it seemed that she really regarded him as a mother. Even if he told her that she was the first god in the world, she still did not change this idea. If it was a human, they might be proud or even have ambitions. But from her expression, it seemed that she didn't know what ambition was. After a while, Dean and Goddess of Wa arrived at the capital of the Federation. He parachuted into the city and found that compared to the chaos in other cities, the war in the capital had already ended. He could see from the soldiers in uniform that the city had been captured by the Federation military. Dean and Wa came to the government building in the capital. They saw a large number of armors and tanks lined up on the spacious streets. The nearby streets were built to be extremely spacious because of the military parade, but at the moment they were fully armed. Dean used his X-ray vision to scan the depths of the building. He saw a large number of figures walking between the floors. Dean found a group of big shots wearing general badges. They gathered in a well-defended office for a meeting. There was a projection of the war situation in other cities. Dean also saw a familiar face among these big shots. It was the chairman of the terrorist consortium, Jacelity. Chapter 1222. The demons have been accumulating troops in the Middle East region. Are they planning to retreat? Now that the capital has been seized by us, I heard that the demon lord has been defeated. Without a leader, they should naturally retreat. Even if they don't retreat, gathering in that barren land in the Middle East region is just digging their own graves. I don't think so. The terrain in the Middle East region is flat and not good for defense. If they want to retreat, they shouldn't choose to gather here. Aren't they afraid that we will wipe them all out? I feel that with the demon's brutal and bloodthirsty nature, retreat is fake. They most likely want to use this place as a springboard to directly attack the capital. Directly attack the capital? General Nye must be joking. The Middle East region is separated by two large rivers, countless ferocious beasts in the rivers, and separated by 8 mountains. The railway tracks are completely sealed. How long would it take to march to the capital from outside the city? By the time they make it halfway, our missiles would have already bombarded them. As far as I know, there is a secret canyon that can directly lead to the capital. However, the canyon's environment is harsh and is occupied by steel snake. These steel snake are venomous creatures to us, but they can't withstand a single blow from the demons. If they advance through the canyon's secret canyon, they can greatly shorten the distance to the capital. Then, they can make a detour from the canyon to Meifeng mountain range and attack the southwest arsenal of the capital. It will be a huge blow to us. In the conference room, when everyone heard General Nye's words, their disapproving expressions turned solemn and their pupils constricted. If it was really as General Nye said, once the demon succeeded, the consequences would be unimaginable. Someone immediately suggested to inspect the canyon's secret canyon. Soon, the map projection on the table was enlarged, and a long curved canyon with a large number of red heat sources could be seen. One had to know that this canyon was full of steel snake. There are few people here, so how could there be heat sources? General Nye's words immediately came true, and everyone's expression changed. These demons are despicable. The demon lord has already retreated, yet they still want to attack our federation and look down on us. Outrageous. We will set a trap in the canyon and bury them while their army is advancing. Everyone was furious and decided to attack the demons. At this time, someone asked the quiet Jaceloti, "Chairman, you said that the demon lord has retreated and was defeated by the god of science and technology. Is that true?" As soon as this was said, everyone's eyes fell on Jaceloti. Of course it's real. Jaceloti came back to his senses and saw a hint of suspicion in everyone's eyes. He snorted coldly. "Do you think I will lie to you? Do you think that the Sir God of Science and Technology is no match for a mere demon overlord? Don't forget who helped you take back the armory in the capital." When everyone heard this, they retracted their gazes. The person who had asked earlier hurriedly smiled apologetically and said, "Chairman, you're being too serious." Of course, We won't doubt the great God of science and technology. Since the Demon Emperor has left, and his army is still determined to attack the Federation, why don't you ask the other 3 consortiums to attack together and cooperate with us to completely destroy these damned demons? Jasaloti snorted coldly. Just as he was about to speak, the wall of the conference room suddenly exploded with a bang. Dust flew everywhere, and steel bars protruded out of the wall. The steel plate embedded in the middle was also pierced. The steel plate was electrified, and at this moment, sparks were flashing from the hole. A slender and cold figure stood in the dust, stepping on the crushed stones on the ground and stepping into the conference room. "Who are you?" "Mangar. Attack of the Demon Clan? How is it possible?" "Guards." The generals and the senior leaders of the Terrace Financial Group in the meeting room were all shocked. Their expressions changed drastically as they looked at the figures that had broken through the wall. This was their headquarters, and there were countless guards, mechas, and war chariots outside. However, the enemy had charged right in front of them. At this moment, they were no different from naked lambs. They were, after all, just ordinary people in front of the demon race. Noisy. A cold snort sounded, and the dust was sucked away by the wind outside, revealing Dean's figure. His cold eyes looked at the people in the conference room, and there seemed to be cold electricity flashing in his eyes. Through genetic enhancement, his spiritual force covered the whole conference room. A cold snort interrupted all the exclamations and shocked everyone's mind, making them feel dizzy. "It's you." Jasaloti was shocked when he saw Dean's face. He jumped out of his chair and cried out in alarm. At this time, the sound of mechanical armors echoed from outside. The sound of uniformed footsteps came from outside. It was the guards who had followed Dean. Generals and consortium directors were relieved as they heard the sound of the guards. Someone saw Jasaloti's abnormal behavior and immediately asked, "Chairman, do you know this person?" Jasaloti's eyes were wide open as he stared at Dean. Dean glanced at him. "Don't think about it. Your so-called god of science and technology has been destroyed by me. From now on, I will be the leader of the Federation. Anyone who disagrees will die. Anyone who resists will die." "Nonsense. Which king of the demon race are you? Tell me your name." A burly general shouted in anger. Although he seemed angry, but his words were calculated. The first purpose was to understand Dean's identity. After all, the Federation was the old enemy of the Empire. The spies of the Federation had been collecting information about the abilities of the kings of the Empire. If they knew who Dean was, they would naturally know his abilities. They could find a way to defeat him. The second purpose was to stall for time. He believed that Dean wouldn't kill everyone outside. After all, if something happened, the outside would be the first to inform them. Therefore, he judged that Dean had used some means to force his way in. He wanted to capture all the leaders so that the Federation would be without a leader. Therefore, the best choice was to stall for time and wait for rescue. Noisy. Dean's face was indifferent as he raised his hand. A ray of light shot out from his fingertips and pierced through the general's forehead. The general's body stiffened and his consciousness disappeared. It seemed that he didn't expect that Dean wouldn't play cards according to the rules. The other generals were shocked and angry as they saw Dudian raise his hand to kill. They clenched their fists, but they didn't dare to provoke Dudian again. "Who else has any questions?" Dean looked at the crowd. Everyone's face turned ugly. No one made a sound as they waited for their subordinates to come to rescue them. Not long after, a calm and magnetic voice sounded out. "Demon Clan inside. Listen up, please leave quickly. Our missiles have already locked onto this place. There are 10 Chuangshi God mecha armor outside, on standby at any time. If you leave now, we'll let you go. If you dare to hurt anyone, we will tear your corpse into 10,000 pieces." Chapter 1223. Everyone was relieved when they heard this. The army outside was safe and sound. "Demon Clan, did you hear that? We have 10 creation god mecha guarding us, and every single creation god mecha can contend against your Demon Clan king. Although I don't know what method you used to sneak in, now that you've been exposed to our satellite surveillance, you won't be able to escape even if you have wings. I advise you to leave quickly. Even if you kidnap us or even kill us, there will still be a new general to preside over the overall situation and annihilate your demon race." A middle-aged man with a square face full of righteousness shouted, "Yes, if you kill one of us, there will be thousands of us. The Federation will never surrender." The others saw that Dean didn't respond, so they responded loudly. Some of them were hot-blooded, while others were trying to save themselves. At the same time, Jasaloti, who was in the crowd, quickly took out his personal communicator. It was a star-shaped accessory that looked like a wheel handle. It was the communicator he used to contact Lin Changsheng. He activated the communicator, and it flashed red. "Can't connect?" Jackety's pupil shrank. He was shocked. This communicator could contact Lin Changsheng at any time. Lin Changsheng lived in the virtual world and didn't have the concept of hibernation. Even if he was in hibernation or busy with other things, he could still sense Jackety's communicator or use his clone to take over the communicator. There had never been a situation where the connection couldn't be reached. His heart shook as he thought of Dean's words. Was it true? Was Lin Changsheng really dead? As the chairman of the Terrace Financial Group, and the only person who had come into direct contact with Lin Changsheng, he knew better than anyone in the Federation how unfathomable Lin Changsheng was, how intelligent he was, and how cunning and vicious he was. Such a person had countless mechanical armies in his hands. He could control the Federation's missile launch at any time. The entire military power of the Federation was equivalent to Lin Changsheng's hands and feet. He was almost an invincible god. He couldn't think of any way to kill him. He was a god. "Noisy," Dean said indifferently. "I'll give you one more chance to choose. Live or die." Dean indifferently glanced at everyone. When everyone saw his eyes, their blood and anger quickly cooled down. It was as if ice water had been poured into them. They felt cold from head to toe. Dean slowly raised his hand. The next moment, his 5 fingers suddenly burst out and turned into a black blade that was tens of meters long. The entire roof of the conference room was cut open and crushed. In less than a tenth of a second, all the powder was shaken out. The conference room was located at the bottom of the most solid building in the government building. It was more than a dozen floors high. At this moment, all the dust dissipated and revealed the blue sky. The sunlight shone down, shining on everyone's bodies. Everyone was stunned and raised their heads to look. It was as if they were peeking at the most beautiful ray of light from the depths of hell, feeling incomparably dazzling. With a wave of his hand, a 3S-level security building was turned into ashes. However, Dean's action didn't stop there. The demonic blades extended from his 5 fingers and extended for tens of meters. Like 5 thick chains, they suddenly penetrated the chests of 5 towering mechas that were more than 10 meters tall. That was the cockpit of the mechas. The mecha operators inside were killed on the spot. The strong composite B-shaped shell could withstand the bombardment of countless rockets, but at this moment, it was easily penetrated like a piece of paper. When the 5 black chains retracted, the pulling force pulled the 5 Genesis god mechas, and they crashed to the ground. The tremors made people's hearts jump. Many generals and consortium directors were stunned. They couldn't believe the horrible scene in front of them. Without the obstruction of the wall, the many guards surrounding the conference room were all exposed. It was as if they had been stripped naked in a world of ice and snow, and there was no way for them to hide. All of the guards were dumbfounded, especially when they saw the 5 Genesis god mechas collapse. They felt as if the entire world had collapsed. These were the most powerful mechas in the Federation. Their ingrained image of power collapsed in an instant. The scene was deathly silent, and it continued for over 10 breaths of time until someone's legs went weak and fell to the ground. Only then did the others wake up, as if from a nightmare, and they noticed that their entire bodies were drenched in cold sweat that drenched their clothes. "No, it's impossible." Lodi was the calmest. However, he couldn't help but scream in his heart when he saw the horrifying scene. At this moment, he was completely convinced of Dean's words. If Lin Changsheng wasn't killed, it was impossible for an existence like Dean to appear here without any warning. The reason why he participated in the military meeting and didn't take advantage of the chaos to seize power was that he knew that Lin Changsheng was still alive. As long as Lin Changsheng was alive, even if the entire Federation collapsed, he could still make a comeback. On the contrary, if Lin Changsheng was dead, then the entire Federation would be torn apart even if there wasn't a civil strife caused by the invasion of the demons. Is it difficult to make a choice? Dean looked at the silent crowd and said indifferently. There was a trace of killing intent in his voice. It seemed that he had lost his patience. I'm willing to be loyal to you. A panicked voice came from the crowd. It was a fat man in a suit. His legs were trembling. From his appearance, it could be seen that he was a director of the consortium. People of any class had a tendency to follow the crowd. When someone took the lead, there would be others who would follow. The other directors immediately expressed their positions. Many generals' faces changed as they looked at Lodi. Lodi's expression changed for a moment. Under Dean's indifferent gaze, he finally gritted his teeth and said, "I have no objection." Many generals' faces turned ashen. After losing the support of the terrorist consortium, their military strength would be reduced by nearly half. After all, only 2 of the 10 creators' mecha were in service. One of them had been destroyed by Dean. Dean's expression was emotionless. He didn't feel happy because of the surrender of the terrorist consortium. It seemed that he didn't feel anything. After waiting for no one to speak, he slowly said, "It seems that the rest of you are unwilling to surrender. In that case, you can all go to hell." As he spoke, a sharp blade protruded from the back of his hand and shot out like a chain. It pierced through the head of the nearest general. Brain juice burst out, and he died on the spot. "General Yu," someone exclaimed. Don't kill me. I'll surrender. I'll surrender. Don't kill me. I'll surrender." The rest of the generals who reacted quickly raised their hands to surrender. Some of them held their heads and squatted down. They were afraid of being hit by the terrifying blade chain. This scene was more embarrassing than the previous time when the consortium directors had surrendered. The guards who surrounded the area looked at each other. They knew that the matter was doomed and couldn't be changed. The sharp blade chain protruded from the back of Dean's hand, swam through the crowd like a viper. It swept past the heads of the generals who had stubborn faces. Their heads fell to the ground one by one. Those who insisted on justice would die. Those who were timid and greedy for life would live. Chapter 1224. Under Du Dian's violent suppression, many senior military officials had to surrender. As for how many of them were sincere and how many of them were hypocritical, there was no need to explore. Tell me about the current situation of the Federation. Has the war with the demons subsided? Dean sat on the chief chair above the conference room. His fingers gently tapped on the table. The previously closed conference room had completely turned into an open-air camp. Outside the conference room, there were 3 layers of guards, mechas, mechanical guards, and so on. They surrounded the conference room and saluted. The generals looked at each other in dismay. Under the watchful eyes of their subordinates, they felt uncomfortable all over and didn't know whether to stand or sit. "Mr. Dean, should we change the place to discuss about the demon race? After all, it's related to the war situation of the entire Federation. In case there are demon spies." Jacelity bit the bullet and said to Dean. However, he wasn't able to finish his words as he was interrupted. "No need." Dean waved his hand and indifferently looked at him. "I have to correct you. I have just said that the Federation will be under my control from now on. This is to tell you that the Federation system has ended and will be replaced by an Empire system. There is only one voice here, and that is me. My status is equivalent to the Emperor of an ancient dynasty. By calling me Mr. Du, you are looking down on my authority. Since this is your first offense, I will let you off this time. If anyone else makes such a stupid mistake in the future, I will not be able to see their heads anymore." Everyone's eyes shrank as they heard Dean's words. They secretly shouted dictatorship in their hearts, but they didn't dare to speak out, especially those who had their vital interests deprived. They clenched their fists and buried their heads so that Dean wouldn't see the hatred and anger in their eyes. "I know I was wrong. Emperor Dean." Jaceloti looked at Dean's emotionless eyes. He quickly bowed his head and admitted his mistake. He sighed in his heart. Wasn't the Federation a dictatorship in the past? But the dictator was Lin Changsheng, who was hiding in the dark. But now it was Dean. It was a naked and undisguised dictatorship. His situation didn't change much for Jacelity. But for the other generals who occupied a big city, like the ancient princes, it was a huge loss. Continue to talk about the situation of the demons. Dean snorted and leaned on the back of the chair. He glanced at the people standing on both sides of the conference table. Many generals and consortium directors didn't dare to take their seats. They were afraid that their every move would anger Dean. The floor at their feet was still flowing with the blood of other rebels. People could feel the bloody, murderous aura in the air all the time. Yes, Emperor. Jaceloti felt bitter in his heart, but he politely nodded and greeted them. Then, he threw this thorny problem to the military beside him and said, "Generals, you are the most familiar with this matter. Tell them." The faces of several generals changed. One of them, who had a black wolf tattoo on his arm, braced himself and said, "Great, great Emperor, these demons are resisting stubbornly. They are gathering in the Middle East. We don't know for the time being whether they plan to evacuate or attack our capital." Middle East? Dean's eyes lit up. "Do you have a map?" "Yes, but the equipment here has been." The general wanted to say that the equipment had been destroyed by Dudian, but he thought of the previous killings. He was afraid to anger Dudian, so he changed his words. "The equipment here is old. It is better to move to the frontline command. There is the most advanced equipment there. There is a holographic map, and the battlefield information is clear at a glance." Dean didn't answer, but asked, "Can we send news to the cities?" The general was puzzled. "Emperor, are you going to release the news?" "We have a variety of channels to release news, and every city has established a disaster communication network that can transmit voice messages. If the equipment in some cities is in good condition and the signal towers are not destroyed, they can also watch our live broadcast on television." "That's good." Dean nodded. "Let's go to the headquarters. Arrange for the news to be broadcast there. I want to announce a few things to the country. I want to quell the demons." Everyone's face changed. They faintly guessed what Dean was going to announce. Once the news was broadcasted, it meant that Dean's identity would be solidified. He would become the #1 person in the Federation. Fine, let's just let it be. If we assassinate him in the future, we can still cripple him. Many generals thought to themselves. Goddesswa followed Dean like a shadow. Others were amazed by the unparalleled beauty of the girl, but they didn't have much other feelings. They knew that demons could change their bodies, including their appearance, because they had been in contact with the demons for a long time. They knew that the demons could change their bodies, including their appearance. So it wasn't worth being amazed by her beauty. After a moment, Dean led the generals and the directors of the consortium to the headquarters. The place was well equipped. The generals naturally knew about the situation in the conference room of the building next to them. Dean's strength was obvious to all. He had destroyed 5 creators' mecha and defeated their strongest individual combat force. This meant that unless they detonated the nuclear weapons and launched all the nuclear bombs stored in the capital at the same time, they could only obediently listen to Dean's words. There was no room for resistance. The 2 commanders came in and ordered the commanders to salute to Dean. It wasn't to flatter Dean, but to protect the commanders. They were worried that they would collide with Dean and be killed by him. The generals in the headquarters could only silently accept the fact in front of the commanders, generals, and other outstanding generals. They couldn't change it for the time being. Very soon, the command center brought up a holographic map of the Federation, which appeared above the desk in the center of the command center. There was a miniature of the 100 cities of the Federation on the map, and almost every city had some red dots. These red dots represented the demons, except for the capital. Only the blue city frame was very clean, indicating that the demons here had been completely wiped out. Even if there were any survivors, they might have hidden themselves, not being detected by the detectors and surveillance cameras. At this time, the live broadcast channel was set up in the headquarters. Everyone's eyes were focused on Dean's body. from the commander to the second lieutenant-level information technician, and even the invited reporters of the federal official news agency were silently watching the youth. His handsome appearance didn't look like a devil's executioner's hands were stained with blood. Instead, he looked like a brilliant TV star. But the invisible majesty exuded from the young man's body. It was unintentional, but it made people feel an inexplicable sense of fear. The entire headquarters was silent. No one dared to make any sound for fear of alarming something. Dean asked the commander next to him to bring him a pen and paper. He quickly wrote a press release and handed it to the reporters. This was the opening of the news. The purpose was naturally to attract the attention of the residents of the Federation who were in deep trouble at the moment. The press release solemnly told them that God had descended and would immediately come to save them. What could be more exciting than this moment when everyone was in a state of panic and unease? The reporter who received the press release quickly glanced at it. Soon he was shocked by the content of the press release. He couldn't help but look up at Dean. This person actually claimed to be a god? The shock lasted for a short time. The beautiful presenter who graduated from a top university and was responsible for reading the press release felt the cold atmosphere in the air. She didn't dare to question or ask any questions. No matter how unbelievable the content was, she decided to broadcast it. When the live news started, she immediately adjusted her expression and posture and recited the press release that she had previously quickly recited. At the same time, the communication stations all over the Federation, old radios, video websites on wristwatches, and even TV sets that were popular with the elderly were broadcasting or reprinting the latest government news from the Federation capital at the same time. In this period of disaster, countless people were looking forward to the movement of the government. Therefore, when the news was broadcasted, countless people saw the news. Some cities were under the attack of the demon race. The TV signal and network equipment were destroyed, but they still had radios. For the education of the Federation, most ordinary people could dismantle their TV sets or wristwatches and transform them into radios. The radio was an antique, but it still existed. In the minds of some warriors who went out to hunt, the radio was better than the wristwatch because the wristwatch couldn't connect to the network in the wasteland. However, the radio could listen to the sounds from the Federation cities. The demon race has disturbed the order of the world. The great God has come to punish the evil demon race. The God has said that the demon race will completely disappear from the Federation in one day. Everyone in the disaster, I empathize with you. Please hold on. Your prayers have come true. The God has really come, the beautiful host said excitedly in front of the camera. Her voice was high-pitched, and she displayed an extremely professional standard. However, in her heart, she didn't believe a single word that came out of her mouth. If there was a God, then why would God allow the existence of the demon race in the world? However, people in despair wouldn't think about these things intellectually and rationally like her. Even for a small number of rational people, even if they were in despair, they would feel that these words were very unscientific. However, the legend of God had been circulating in the Federation. After all, the demon race existed. Shouldn't there be a God? This wasn't the materialistic society of the old era. Although the Federation's technology was ahead of the old era, but in such a world environment, most people always believed that there was a God in the world. Dean had absorbed the memory of Lin Changsheng. He had a deep understanding of the thinking of the Federation civilians. The most important thing was that no matter whether others believed it or not, he would use facts to prove it. After all, seeing is believing. Many generals silently listened to the passionate performance of the beautiful host. Their eyes fell on Dean. They felt strange and sad at the same time. A demon race had run in front of them and declared that he was a god. However, they couldn't refute it. Very quickly, the beautiful MC finished her press release, and the camera switched to the command center. Many generals and directors of the Terrace Financial Group were gathered there, including the famous Ceciloti in the Federation. It was a dazzling scene, and anyone who saw it would feel excited and excited. This meant that the Federation had not fallen, and they were still fighting against the demon race. Two extraordinary faces stood in the middle of the crowd. Dean's cheeks had become more and more handsome after he had evolved into the Abyss Walker. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the appearance of the snail god was a calamity that could cause the downfall of a city. Her beauty was impeccable. The two of them stood together like gods. The ordinary, rough, and ugly faces of the other generals were covered. It was a strong contrast. Is this God? What a beautiful girl. What a handsome guy. Is there really a God? How is it possible? Is it fake? Countless people who saw the scene through the live broadcast were surprised. Some people who were in a relatively safe environment had fallen into the illusion of Dean and Goddess of Wa. Are these the cities that were invaded by the demon race? Dean pointed at the holographic projection and asked the commander next to him. The commander was at a loss. Didn't I tell you before? Why are you asking again? Soon, he thought of the live broadcast. Dean was deliberately putting on a show. As for the purpose, he couldn't guess it. But most likely it was to confuse the world. Yes, the red dots on these cities are the invading demon race. The commander was very cooperative. He was trying to figure out Dean's intention. As for tearing off Dean's mask in front of the live broadcast, he wouldn't do it. Godwa, do you remember all of these cities? Especially the Middle East region. Most of the demons are gathered there. Go and destroy them. Dean turned to look at the snail god. His voice naturally spread out from the live broadcast. Goddess of Wa. Countless people were excited and curious. Some of them had a skeptical attitude. Yes, Goddess of Wa nodded obediently. Are you waiting for me here? Yes, I'll wait for you here. Come back quickly. Dean smiled. Then I'll go. Goddess Wa grinned. Her perfect face once again stunned everyone. Even the generals who knew the truth couldn't help but take a few more glances at her, feeling a surge of heat in their hearts. Dean sent a telepathic message to her. Goddess of Wa understood and smiled. She seemed to find it very interesting. Her body exuded silver hazy light. A pair of snow-white and beautiful wings stretched out from her back. It wasn't as ferocious and brutal as the wings she used in the previous battle. She was like a fairy in the moon, a fairy that existed in myths. She had a beautiful face, beautiful white wings, and her whole body was covered in a hazy divine light. Her body slowly floated up, and with a whoosh, she disappeared through the dome wall of the command center. However, the dome was not damaged at all, and the camera outside the command center immediately switched, capturing her back as she shuttled out of the building and soared into the sky. If she wasn't a goddess, then what was she? All the people who saw the scene were shocked. What followed was incomparable excitement and excitement. Some people even had tears streaming down their cheeks. Someone had finally come to save them. No, it was God. God, you are finally willing to care for us. At this moment, many cities that were under the attack of the demon race cheered. Their prayers had come true. They didn't need to hide under the dark bed and shiver. God would come to save them. Some people looked out of the window, hoping to see the beautiful figure flying over the sky. In the cities that had not been invaded by the demon tribe, countless people saw this scene. Some of them were incredibly excited, while others maintained their rationality. They were skeptical, but most of them believed it. After all, this miraculous scene was real. Secondly, there were a group of generals wearing countless shining medals guarding the scene. There were also many directors of the Terrace Financial Group, as well as a legendary figure like Jay Slitty. None of these people refuted it. It was clear that they had admitted it. In front of so many authoritative figures, how could a fake trick be hidden from them? So most of it was true. Please remember this book's domain name. Mobile version. Chapter 1225. In front of the live news, Dean was surrounded by many generals and consortium directors. He looked up at the holographic image suspended in the air. The surveillance of the Federation couldn't detect Goddess Wa, but he could speculate her approximate position in his mind from the speed at which she left. Emperor, do we need to do anything? A major general saw that everyone was silent, so he couldn't help but ask Dean. In his mind, even if they were held hostage by Dean, but if they could use Dean to repel the demons, then they wouldn't be humiliated here in vain. No need, Dadian indifferently said. She alone is enough to deal with a low-level demon. You will watch from here. In less than an hour, the Middle East will become a forbidden area for the demons." As soon as these words came out, everyone was shocked, including the audience watching the live broadcast of the news. They were all dumbfounded. One person could wipe out the demons in the Middle East in 1 hour? It should be known that this was a large area, not just a city. There were countless devils gathered in it, let alone an hour. Even if the federal army attacked for 10 days or half a month, they might not be able to capture this area. Dean didn't explain much. Goddess Wa was the first god of the earth. The demons in the Middle East didn't even have a king. The highest commander in the Middle East was the Lord of the Abyss. They were like babies in front of Goddess Wa. When he said 1 hour, he was giving Goddess Wa some leeway. He was worried that she would waste time because of her lust for fun. In fact, if it were him, it would not even take him half an hour to take the head of the enemy general and defeat the demons immediately. Hundreds of thousands of demons are gathered in the Middle East. They're disturbing the world and killing innocent people. Won't the civilians suffer if they can't be wiped out within an hour? Dean said again. The generals were dumbfounded. What Dean said was right, but he had to be able to do it. Some meticulous people heard the overtones of the words. It seemed that Dean was accusing the demons of killing and showing benevolence. But in fact, he was talking about the hundreds of thousands of troops of the demons. Once the girl defeated the demons, then a more powerful image would be erected on her body. This image, combined with Dean's previous words, would undoubtedly make the masses believe that they were gods. If it wasn't a god who could repel hundreds of thousands of demons alone, even they couldn't deny this point. They knew that even the king of the demons couldn't do it. However, if it was really the demon king, there was another way to force the demon king to retreat in less than an hour, and that was to issue an order. Wasn't it the same for the people to retreat in the name of the king of the demons? Cold sweat broke out as they thought of this. Was this a conspiracy of the demons? If they really succeeded, wouldn't they be able to take away the ruling power of the Federation without losing a single soldier? The more he thought about it, the more frightened he became. The originally slightly shocked and silent atmosphere suddenly rippled with uneasiness. Standing in the center of the crowd, Dean vaguely felt a trace of abnormality. His expression did not change, but he used his peripheral vision to capture the expressions and eyes of everyone around him. Suddenly, he saw a clue. After a little thought, he guessed the problem. Before he could open his mouth to break everyone's conjecture, he suddenly felt the muscles of one of the generals tighten, and his body reacted abnormally, as if he was preparing to do something. The next moment, he saw the general clench his fists and stare at him angrily, shouting, "Evil demon, don't think that your evil plan will succeed. You are a demon, not some bullsh *T god. Don't think that you can—" Before he could say the word hostage, his voice suddenly stopped. Dean reacted and took action as soon as the general said the first word. Although the speed of the general wasn't slow, but in his eyes the actions of the ordinary people were like the speed of a turtle. Courting death, Dean raised his hand, and the light refracted from the crystal particles in his palm turned golden, like a divine light, which enveloped the man and forced the words out of his mouth into his throat. He felt a gust of wind from his mouth, unable to breathe, and his tongue was oppressed to the point that he couldn't move. The other generals couldn't help but change their expressions. They were ready to take action, but at this moment, the general who was shrouded in golden light suddenly roared like a beast. The sound didn't sound like a human, but like the roar of a monster. The generals who were ready to defend were shocked. They looked back in horror. Puff! A bloody tentacle broke through the golden light and slapped towards Dean. Dean picked up the notebook on the table, tore a page from it, and threw it. The paper was covered with a layer of golden light. Puff! The blood tentacles were cut off. The next moment, everyone saw the true face of the general. He was covered with strange tentacles and a ferocious mouth. He was like a monster mixed with countless visceral tissues. No one knew where his body came from as he rushed towards Dean. Purification! Dean shouted and raised his hand. His palm was shrouded in golden light as he slapped towards the general's head. His palm instantly became bigger and turned into a giant palm. Bang! The general was smashed into the ground of the headquarters. The ground shook and a huge pit was formed. The general's body had turned into blood and exuded a fishy smell. Fortunately, the building was earthquake-proof. Although the walls were shaking, but there were no signs of cracks. Everyone in the headquarters was completely sluggish when Dean retracted his palm. They couldn't believe what they saw. Demon? The demon had sneaked into their side and had a meeting with them? This sudden turn of events not only stunned everyone present, but it also stunned the audience watching the live broadcast. But soon, everyone's eyes were brimming with tears of excitement. Slapping a demon to death with a raise of his hand, his handsome face, his invincible strength, all of which displayed the demeanor of a god. After a brief silence, Dadian indifferently said, "I didn't notice that a demon had sneaked in here." Fortunately, he was reckless and exposed his identity. Everyone was shocked as they looked at the blood pit on the ground. They couldn't speak for a long time. Jasaloti was as shocked as everyone else. But soon he felt that something was wrong. If the general was a demon, then why would he jump out and accuse Dean? He absolutely didn't believe in God because Dean was captured and imprisoned like a dog by Lin Changsheng. He didn't have the ability to resist. Is it a double act? No, he can kill Lin Changsheng. He doesn't need to use such a clumsy method. Jasaloti frowned. He felt that this man couldn't be provoked. The other generals woke up from the initial shock. Some of them were aware of the abnormality of this matter. They were more vigilant against Dean and didn't dare to accuse him. After all, although they were suspicious, but they haven't seen how Dean turned an ordinary person into a demon. Acting rashly would only put them in the same dangerous situation. Dean faintly glanced at everyone. There was a hint of warning in his eyes. The method to turn the general into a demon was very simple for him. He only needed to inject part of his tissues into the ground through the soles of his feet. Then he would drill into the body from the soles of other people's feet. Then he would destroy the brain and take over the body. On the surface, it seemed as if the demon had exposed his true body. This was the reason why he wasn't afraid of the live broadcast. Even if someone jumped out to accuse him, he could suppress them. Moreover, it would become a stepping stone for his image. Demons are pervasive. After this incident is over, we will give everyone a collective inspection in case there are other demons mixed in. Dean indifferently said. Everyone heard the warning in his words. They felt that this man was 100 times more terrifying than a demon. Chapter 12:26. Dean estimated that God of Wa was about to arrive in the Middle East. Can you get the details of the cities in the Middle East? The two commanders and many generals couldn't help but look at the lieutenant general who was in charge of the battlefield information. The lieutenant general had never felt that the eyes of an outsider could be so sharp. He had a feeling of cold sweat. If he agreed, then it was tantamount to following Dean. If the federal government regained control in the future, then he would naturally be held responsible for this matter. If he denied, then he would offend Dean. The lieutenant general hesitated between his future and his life. He chose Dean's side. It can be transferred. Emperor, please take a look. He waved his hand to instruct the technicians to transfer the holographic images of the Middle East. The map of the Federation that was suspended on the table was converted into a partial map. Dean glanced at it. Can you pull up a surveillance video of each city? Yes, the lieutenant general replied. Very soon, a few square screens appeared on one side of the table. Sounds of explosions and cries could be heard, but as soon as they started, they stopped abruptly. A technician had muted the screen. Dean said in a calm tone, "Turn on the sound." The technician was afraid to disturb Dadian, but at the moment he heard the displeasure in Dudian's words. Cold sweat dripped down his back. He quickly turned on the sound and made it louder. On the screen, the sky was filled with smoke and buildings were being bombed and collapsed. Noisy wails and the sound of gunfire mixed together. Every time a building collapsed, people could be seen fleeing from the bottom of the building like rats. Those who escaped slower were crushed by the collapsed rubble and buried alive on the spot. Every screen was a purgatory on earth. A large number of demons were gathered in the cities of the Middle East. They were the most tragic areas of the war. The residents of the cities were either captured or slaughtered. Even the dignitaries who were hiding in the underground shelters were pulled out and slaughtered like cattle and sheep. There were corpses everywhere on the streets. There were old people and children. Gynecological hospitals couldn't escape from the artillery shells. Many generals in the conference room couldn't help but change their expressions when they saw such a tragic scene. As for the people watching the live broadcast of the news, all of them had tears streaming down their cheeks. Some of them felt their blood flow in the opposite direction, and their hearts were filled with hot blood. They wished they could go to the battlefield themselves, but they calmed down under the tugs of their families. Some of the people in the disaster areas saw these scenes and felt the same, crying bitterly. As for the residents in the less affected cities, they saw the scene of their compatriots being slaughtered and died tragically, and they were all shocked and angry. Only some naive boys and girls were immersed in their own games, animations, shopping, and entertainment. They didn't care about the disturbances of the outside world unless the internet was disconnected. These demons deserved to die 10,000 times for their sins. Dean looked at the tragic scene on the screen. His body was covered in hazy golden light, as if he was really angry. Many generals and consortium directors were still immersed in the front-line battlefield. They were startled as they saw Dean's angry face. They didn't expect him to be angry because of the innocent civilians. However, they immediately sobered up when they saw the hazy golden light around Dean's body. They were ashamed of their naivety. "Today, I'm going to expel and annihilate all the demons," Dean said solemnly as he looked at the live broadcast. Everyone was surprised. A general next to him couldn't help but ask, "Eliminate all the demons in one day?" "Yes, one day." Dean's eyes were cold. "Before the sun sets, all the demons in the Federation will be annihilated." Everyone looked at each other. They knew that Dean was acting. However, if he said this in front of the news, then wouldn't it be a slap in the face if the media in the cities exposed that there was a demon ransacking? Or was he really sure that he could order all the demons to retreat in one day? Suddenly, there was a burst of exclamation. The exclamation was so loud that everyone could not help but look in the direction of the sound, only to find that the sound came from the screen. A beam of divine light flew across the sky, and then they saw a beautiful figure like a goddess descending. Beautiful wings on her back and a perfect face. Wasn't it Goddess Wa who had just left not long ago? Everyone was shocked. It was a long way from the capital to the Middle East. Even the fastest fighter would take half an hour. But how long did it take? Less than 10 minutes. The next moment, everyone saw Goddess Wa shuttling through the city like a silver light. Countless demons were killed on the streets. She raised her hand and shot out countless silver lights. They were like needles that pierced into the ground. Every demon that was pierced by the silver light died. This scene appeared on the monitor screen and also appeared in the eyes of the people who were watching the live broadcast. The entire Federation was boiling. Even though they were in despair and danger, everyone was excited and howling. God had really come. God said that she would save them, and she really appeared on the battlefield to save them. Everyone in the command center was also stunned by Goddess Wa's strength on the screen. It was a bloody massacre. At this speed, not to mention 1 hour, she could kill all the demons in the Middle East in half an hour. Dean was surprised. He didn't expect that the monitor could capture Goddess Wa's figure. But since it had been captured, there was no need to continue the recording. In case she showed some cruel means and made people think of the demons, then it wouldn't be good. Turn off the screen and look at the situation of the demons in the Middle East. Dean ordered. The screen was quickly turned off. The people in front of the live broadcast wanted to see more. At this time, everyone saw that the red dots in a city in the Middle East were rapidly disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The originally densely packed red dots covered the entire city, but at this moment, like an eraser, they were forcibly erased, revealing the original blue outline of the pattern. "It's Blizzard City. She's killing the demons there. Hurry up. Contact the military and tell them to stand by and defend." Also send the previous video and tell them to do everything possible to cooperate with her. The generals knew that Goddess, wasn't acting. Dean was really going to kill the demons. It was a rare opportunity, so they immediately seized it to cooperate with Dean. At the same time, in the temporary headquarters built by the Empire in the Middle East, the changes in Blizzard City alarmed the Empire's upper echelons. They immediately held a meeting. Several generals of the Federation who had surrendered to the Empire got the news from their subordinates. They immediately connected to the network and saw the live broadcast of the Federation. Their faces changed dramatically. They immediately found the highest commanders of the Empire and the Lords of the Pit. After telling them about the live broadcast, the Lords of the Deep Caves immediately asked him to play the live broadcast. The upper echelons of the Empire saw the situation in the capital. They also saw Dean, who was surrounded by many generals. They also saw the video of Goddess while slaughtering the soldiers of Blizzard City. Expel us in one day? Ridiculous. I'd like to see what will happen if she can't do it. Have you analyzed the woman's combat strength? A few moments later, the Empire's technician used the latest technology to analyze Goddess Wa's stats from a screen. Her combat power was estimated to be 30 million. According to the evaluation of the Combat Power Index, the 7 kings of the Empire had a combat power index of around 10 million. For example, the Radiant King and the newly emerged Crimson Moon King only had a combat power index of around 20 million. Although this was not their full strength, it could still be used as a reference for the evaluation. Everybody almost jumped out of their chairs after hearing the combat ability index of more than 30 million. One of the Lords of the Deep Caves, who had threatened to kill God Wa, also flinched and felt chilled. Is she a king? Someone was surprised. I can't believe the Federation hid such a person. These damn things stole our power and cultivated a king. The king is strong, but not invincible. Mobilize all the missiles and lock on her. Kill her. Everyone regained their calmness soon. Although Goddess Wa's combat strength was beyond their imagination, the war couldn't be solved by individual force alone. They had brought a lot of advanced weapons from the Empire and seized a lot of lethal weapons from the Federation. Even if the king came, he would have to go back lying down. Asang mobile phone. Chapter 12:27. Many generals and directors of consortiums in the capital looked up at the microcosm of the cities in the Middle East. They held their breath as they watched the red dots disappear one by one. The people of the Federation who were watching the live broadcast once again showed hope in their despairing eyes. They were excited as they watched the scene. Time passed, and the red dot was shrinking with every passing moment. Dean mobilized the monitoring system of the cities that had been cleaned up. Everyone saw that the cities were in a mess. There were traces of fighting everywhere. There were huge craters caused by missile bombardment. Blood flowed like rivers in the streets. Countless corpses of the demons were scattered on the ground. The whole city was bleeding. In this desolate scene, some survivors could be seen carefully walking out of the shelter and looking on the street. Some civilians were holding their wristwatches. It seemed that the wristwatches were broadcasting the news live. They also saw through the live news that the city they lived in had been cleaned up and there were no demons left. Soon, more and more people came out of their hiding places. Most of them had disheveled hair and dirty faces. After these people learned that their city was safe through the live broadcast of the news, they came out of their hiding places. Seeing the streets full of demon corpses and the unprecedented silence, they couldn't help but roar in excitement. Even if their voices were hoarse, they didn't have any scruples. There were also people who ran to spread the news loudly, letting other survivors who were curled up in the nest know about it. Countless survivors who didn't know each other felt sympathetic when they saw each other. Some hugged and some cheered together. Many people in other cities felt the same way when they saw this scene, and tears streamed down their cheeks. In the blink of an eye, half an hour passed. Everyone saw that the gathering of the demons in the Middle East had changed. The red dots of the demons gathered in the same place and then retreated outside the Middle East region. Obviously, the strong attack of Goddess Wa had frightened the demons who were ready to resist. They had no choice but to retreat. When a general said they are ready to escape, according to the information, countless people fell shocked. Half an hour ago, the Middle East was still a sea of demons, which gave them a headache. At this moment, it had been cleared out, and these horrible demons were beaten back. Everything seemed like a dream, but from the screen, the audience could almost see how dangerous the battle was when Goddess Wa was annihilating the devil race. This was not an act, but a real fist to repel these devils. For a time, many generals found that their understanding of Dean couldn't be defined as a demon. However, no one would believe that he was a god. But in any case, Dean had slaughtered the demons and saved the Federation. In less than an hour, Goddess Wa returned. She still looked like a moon elf, pure and flawless. Her body was shrouded in a hazy, silver radiance, making her look incomparably holy. Her perfect face was tranquil and elegant, as if there was not a speck of dust on it. It was clear that he had just fought a great battle, but there were no wounds on his body at all. It was as if he had just taken a bath. Such battle prowess shocked everyone, and all of them were filled with admiration. I've said that I'll expel all the demons today, so I'll definitely do it. Dean smiled as he looked at the returning god of Wa. The Middle East region has been cleaned up. Now he will start to clean up the second region. Which region is second only to the Middle East? The generals looked at each other. One of them whispered, "In addition to the Middle East, the Northwest region is the most severely affected. Many cities there have run out of food and water. Everyone is in danger." "That's the Northwest region," Dean said without hesitation. He looked at Goddess Wa. "You go there." Goddess Wa smiled and nodded. She left again. The people in front of the live broadcast were excited. The fierce demons were like ants in front of Dean. He could destroy them at any time. The Middle East region was the best evidence. The generals accompanied Dean to observe the situation in the Northwest region through the monitor. It didn't take long for them to see that the number of demons in the area had decreased significantly. They knew that Goddess Wa had arrived. Soon, a city was cleaned up. Dean asked people to pull up the monitoring of the city. Once again, countless people were excited. The generals of the Federation and the directors of the Terrace Financial Group were all shocked. They had a feeling that the situation was irreversible. Perhaps all the demons within the Federation's borders would really be exterminated within a day. What would it mean if this matter was completed? They didn't need to think to know that the people of the Federation would regard Dean as a god from now on. Dean's status in the Federation would be unshakable. Even if the authoritative figures jumped out to accuse him, Dean would use the previous strange means to turn them into demons and kill them on the spot. Most of their families would be implicated and spurned after they died as demons. There was no solution. Everyone felt that it was almost impossible to trip Dean. In fact, it was hundreds of times more difficult than expelling the demon clan. With this in mind, many people's thoughts slowly began to move. They began to ponder over their own position. Could they change it a little and truly serve this expert in exchange for the position of Doyen? Many people's eyes gradually changed as they thought about this. Dean could feel the changes around him, but he didn't care about it. Everything was within his expectations. People's hearts were unpredictable, but 90% of the people's hearts could be manipulated by the word interest. On the other side, as the news of the fall of the Middle East was released, the demons in other regions all noticed the live broadcast of the news and learned about the existence of Goddess Wa. Judging from the fact that Goddess Wa conquered the Middle East and defeated hundreds of thousands of soldiers of the Empire, she was even stronger than ordinary kings, which made the demons in other regions both unwilling and angry. However, in the end, they could only retreat with the main troops. The remaining demons didn't have the idea to test the Federation after the Northwest region was wiped out. They quickly mobilized their subordinates and left the Federation at full speed. Around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the generals in the command saw that the demons had gathered in the cities of the Federation. There were only a few stragglers that could be killed at any time. Those stragglers were captured by the garrison forces that ruled the cities. At this time, the other 3 consortiums also intervened to help clean up the rest of the demons. The news was transferred to another place when the sun went down. The government officially announced that all the demons had been killed and the Federation had restored its safety. Countless people who had suffered from the disaster cried tears of joy as the news came out. However, they cried for their loved ones and loved ones who had died. The entire Federation stayed up all night. The live broadcast once again followed Dean. Dean was surrounded by the generals. He directed everyone to do post-war work, clean up the battlefield and corpses, restore the water, electricity, and food in the cities, and so on. Of course, to him, all of this was just a verbal statement, and it was enough to show his will. In addition, Dean led a group of generals and senior members of the three consortiums to visit some of the affected cities. In just one day, many refugees knew about Dean's identity. They knelt and cried as they saw him. Dean healed some of the injured refugees. He once again showed his godlike ability. He returned to the federal government building in the capital. He ordered people to prepare for the Federation General Assembly. All the senior members of the Federation were present. Even the directors and leaders of the four consortiums were no exception. When the meeting started, the live broadcast of the news switched to the various cities. The army was busy transporting the injured and setting up medical tents in the dark. The various disaster cities were gradually recovering. After the preparations were done, the live broadcast once again focused on the grand meeting. After Dean's brief speech, a general immediately spoke and excitedly asked Dean to be the president of the Federation. As soon as these words were spoken, //3_3610/ Chapter 1228. Everything in the conference hall was carried out like a rehearsal. Everyone was looking forward to the warm atmosphere. Dean was elected as the leader. Dean didn't continue to play the kind face. He pondered for a moment and said in a cold voice, "Although we have expelled the demons, but the demons will come back. While we're cheering for the victory, please look around you and see how many comrades you will never see again. Look outside and see how many people are still crying and calling the names of their loved ones." The warm atmosphere cooled down as they heard Dean's words. It was as if a basin of cold water was poured over everyone's head. Suddenly, there was a bit of shame in them. Why did such a situation occur? Have you ever reflected on your actions? Dean questioned. The huge conference hall was silent. The crowd in front of the live broadcast was silent. The reason is very simple. Dean said in a cold voice. First, the Federation's top level is incompetent. That gave the demons an opportunity to take advantage of them. Second, there is no unity. Apart from the terrorist consortium, what were the other three consortia doing when the demons invaded? Third, the military factions are complex. The support and intelligence sharing during the war are not in place. In short, they are in a state of disunity. A director of the Law Consortium was about to open his mouth to argue, but was immediately pressed down by the chairman, who stared at him. The conference room remained silent. Silence was approval. The crowd in front of the live broadcast knew little about the affairs of the upper class. They suddenly realized the reason after listening to Dean. As for whether it was the real reason or not, they didn't analyze it. First, they couldn't analyze it. Second, Dean's identity meant that he couldn't lie in their mind. After all, he was a god. Whatever God said was right, it was right. This corrupt system should be abandoned long ago. Dean's eyes were filled with disdain. You are a group. The entire Federation is a group. There only needs to be one voice in the group. Only in this way, the execution and efficiency will be greatly improved. It will also reduce the internal strife. So I think it is necessary to abandon the federal system and adopt a centralized system. I will temporarily manage the entire Federation before the demons are eliminated. From now on, the word Federation will be removed and changed to Dynasty. Do you have any objections? Everyone in the conference hall had long known that Dean would centralize power to rule the Federation. At the moment, they all sighed in their hearts. They knew that things had come to this point and could no longer be changed. However, such a change in the system would naturally harm the interests of many people. It was a director of the Milan Consortium who jumped out as soon as Dean finished his words. Please forgive me for not agreeing. This director's face was full of anger. He seemed to have suppressed it for a long time, but he still maintained his rationality and said, the reason why the demons were able to invade the peace circle this time is because the demon emperor personally led the 7 great kings to attack. It has nothing to do with the federal system. Even if it was a centralized system facing today's result, the result would still be the same. I don't think there's a need. Dean raised his hand and interrupted him, but he didn't explain. Guard, take him out. The man didn't expect Dean to act without scruples. He couldn't help but shout, you can't do this to me. The guards on standby around the conference hall were expressionless. They stepped forward and dragged him out of the chair. Stop. What he said is right. Why should we take him out? Do you really think that you are a god? Don't think that we don't know your true identity. Do you believe that I won't expose your false face in front of everyone? Voices were heard from all over the conference hall. The more people spoke, the louder the voices became. Dean quietly looked at the 8 people who jumped out. He said, is there anyone else who has the same idea as them? The other generals and directors of the terrorist consortium who were in the headquarters didn't look sideways. It seemed as if they didn't see anything. They knew better than these people that Dean wasn't as kind as he had shown on a live broadcast. God? Even if he was a god, he was an evil god. Since there is no one else, then take all of them out and directly put them in prison, Dean said in a cold voice. The 8 people who spoke were stunned. Put them all in prison? This was done in front of countless people. You're a god. How could you do such an unreasonable thing? Why are you imprisoning us? We didn't commit a crime. That's right. Can't we even say a word here? If that's the case, who can say anything when the Federation falls into your hands in the future? 2 people were anxious and angry as they saw the guards come over. Obliterate the blasphemers, Dean said to Goddess Wa, who was next to him. Clean them all up. Goddess Wa knew what Dean meant and what he was planning. She showed a rare, serious look on her beautiful face. She seemed to be irritated by the words of these people. She was covered in a hazy silver light, looking as pure and holy as when she annihilated the demon clan. She raised her hand, and several beams of light shot out, hitting the 8 people who were talking. The 8 people stiffened, and the next moment, their bodies shattered like ice crystals, turning into sparkling powder and drifting away. Nothing was left. The whole conference hall was silent. Everyone looked at the scene in disbelief. They didn't expect that Dean would dare to kill people in front of hundreds of millions of people. Didn't he care about the God image that he had created? Some people couldn't believe it, but some people seemed to understand. They couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. I know that changing the system will harm the interests of some vermin, so they couldn't help but jump out. But I didn't think that there would be so many. Dean glanced at the audience. I know that some of you have the same idea as them, but you are smart enough to choose to hide. I know all of your thoughts. I didn't pull you out because the Federation has just suffered a disaster. It needs people to help rebuild their homes. In the future, if I find that you have the behavior of vermin again, I won't forgive you. Everyone looked at each other and didn't dare to say a word. In front of the live broadcast, the audience saw that Dean had ordered God of Wa to kill 8 people. However, they weren't afraid or blaming him. On the contrary, they were excited. This was God. He was thinking about everything for them. As for the 8 people who jumped out to accuse God, they were cursed before Dean could act. When they were killed, many people clapped their hands and cheered. Many people didn't have a good impression of the high-level officials of the Federation. On the contrary, Dean, who had expelled the demons and saved them from fear, made them feel grateful. Through this incident, people felt that Dean was a god. God naturally had the majesty of a god. It was a mortal sin to be questioned by mortals. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.